23, 2026, London awoke to an unprecedented revelation. Buckingham Palace had quietly but decisively confirmed what the inner circles of royalty had long suspected. Prince William, the Prince of Wales, has officially been named the sole beneficiary of one of the monarchy's most secretive, strategically significant, and historically potent private estates, the enigmatic Cedar Estate. This announcement, delivered in a meticulously worded midnight dispatch, sent ripples across royal watchers, historians, and political observers alike. The official statement, released at 11:58 p.m. GMT on the palace's authorised channels, outlined that, under the terms of a sealed covenant trust, executed by Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II in 2020 and formally witnessed by her legal counsel, the property known as the Cedar Estate shall pass in full and exclusive guardianship to His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, effective immediately. Royal insiders were stunned, not simply by the inheritance itself, but by the enormous symbolic weight of what it represents for the future of the monarchy and its private legacy. Tucked away deep within the Chiltern Hills, straddling the border between Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire, the Cedar Estate has long been whispered about by senior courtiers as a strategic royal refuge. Unlike the widely recognised ceremonial estates of Sandringham, Balmoral or Windsor, this estate remained a shadow of secrecy, never officially listed in royal documents, the royal registry, or public media reports. Until now, its existence was nothing more than a quiet palace rumour. The revelation today exposes a legacy that could very well reshape the perception of royal stewardship for generations to come. Originally purchased in 1944 by King George VI, the Cedar Estate was conceived as a wartime retreat, designed with emergency bunkers, underground passageways, and a perimeter fortified by centuries-old cedar groves. The central mansion, a masterpiece of Jacobean revivalist architecture, is surrounded by 3 working farms, a glacial-fed lake, and a 12th-century stone chapel that has never been opened to the public. It's a place where history and secrecy entwine. Internal briefing notes, shared this morning with members of the Royal Correspondent Guild, provide breathtaking insight into the estate's contents. Among the treasures, a private chapel with an engraved memorial vault listing royal family members who served in armed conflicts. Archival vaults housing 186 oak chests filled with personal war correspondence and confidential royal communiques. 72 previously undisclosed royal portraits, including never-before-seen oil paintings of King George VI and Princess Margaret, and 14 sealed audio recordings of Queen Elizabeth II in private dialogue with Winston Churchill, Nelson Mandela, Ronald Reagan, and Charles de Gaulle. One archivist described the collection as not a museum of history, but the raw, unfiltered architecture of royal memory, offering a window into the private soul of the monarchy. Sources close to the late Queen insist that the decision to pass the estate to William was not impulsive, but rather the result of years of careful consideration. Between 2017 and 2021, Prince William reportedly spent numerous private weekends at the Cedar Estate, walking the cedar groves with the Queen, reviewing wartime correspondence, and assisting in restoration projects within the South Vault. In a handwritten annotation found in the Covenant Trust, Queen Elizabeth II reportedly wrote, "He will inherit more than the crown. He will inherit the silence that preserved it." This is not ceremonial duty. It's legacy stewardship. William was the only senior royal consulted by the Queen during her late-life reforms, which included overhauling royal education, increasing transparency, and modernising institutional record-keeping. Aides described his visits as quiet but profoundly engaged. He personally catalogued naval dispatches, refiled hundreds of letters from World War II soldiers, and even repaired moisture control systems in the archival chambers. Unlike typical ceremonial visits to royal estates, this was hands-on governance of history itself. The Cedar Estate is unlike any other royal property. It does not fall under the Crown Estate nor the Duchy of Cornwall. Instead, it exists under a private legal mechanism, a covenant trust created in 2020, filed under Charter Seal 0142 and witnessed by her personal solicitor, a constitutional advisor, and a notary from the Royal Archives. The trust was sealed and equipped with a delayed activation clause, designed to activate only after the Queen's state funeral concluded and Prince William was publicly recognised as heir to institutional responsibility. That moment has now arrived. However, this decision stirred quiet tension behind the palace walls. Multiple sources confirm that Queen Camilla and her son Tom Parker Bowles had been observing the estate for years, quietly but persistently angling to bring it under their influence. Beginning in late 2024, Camilla advocated for turning the estate into a sanctuary of modern royal service, proposing a Windsor Cultural Legacy Centre, gourmet retreats celebrating British culinary heritage, literary salons emphasising female royal narratives, and small group historical tours through the Cedar Groves. Meanwhile, Tom Parker Bowles saw enormous commercial potential in the property. Private memos, reviewed by royal insiders, show he considered opening a Michelin-grade tasting restaurant inside the old hunting lodge, launching an artisanal food brand, Royal Wild, featuring cedar-aged cheeses, wild trout, honey from estate hives, and seasonal Highland wine and cider fairs for elite guests. A leaked briefing note dated October 18, 2025, revealed that his legal team even evaluated whether portions of the estate could be reclassified under public heritage law, arguing that its wartime origins justified cultural protection. In November 2025, Camilla hosted a private reception at a countryside manor near Henley-on-Thames, inviting heritage donors, food critics, and art historians. On the surface, it celebrated rural sustainability, but attendees tell a different story. The event was a trial balloon for a public-private stewardship model, allowing the royal household and the Crown Charitable Council, tied to Camilla's foundation, to share control over the estate. William politely but firmly declined, maintaining the Queen's original vision. 3 weeks later, he activated the Covenant Trust. On January 31, 2026, the land registry quietly updated. The estate officially named North Acre Hall, a sprawling 1,200-acre heritage property nestled among Wiltshire's ancient hedgerows and Berkshire's rolling hills, now securely under William's stewardship. Historically, it had been a lesser-known royal retreat, hosting hunting weekends and sensitive diplomatic gatherings during Queen Elizabeth II's reign. Its combination of historical prestige, agricultural revenue, and untapped licensing rights linked to an 800-year legacy rendered it a rare and uniquely strategic royal asset. Documents dated September 8, 2022, reveal that just weeks before the Queen's passing, she formally reclassified North Acre Hall from a shared Crown estate asset to a personal sovereign holding, ensuring she could transfer it privately through her will rather than via institutional succession. In Appendix R3, she wrote, "Let North Acre remain with the child who bears the burden of our future. Let it be not merely shelter, but sanctuary." The decision bypassed both Prince Charles, now King, and Princess Anne, sending quiet but significant ripples through the inner royal circle. According to palace archivists, this was the first personal transfer of its kind since Queen Victoria's 1872 Highland reallocation, executed in absolute secrecy. Only 2 living witnesses, Lady Sarah Chatto and the late Queen's legal advisor, Sir Alice Denholm, were privy to the codicil and its encrypted delivery method. The envelope was deposited in a sealed box marked, "For the reign after me," to be opened only after ceremonial consensus between the new sovereign and the Privy Seal office. Not everyone inside the palace was pleased with the revelation. Leaked notes from an aide to Princess Anne indicate that Camilla and Tom Parker Bowles had been lobbying discreetly since 2023 to incorporate North Acre Hall into a royal culinary heritage venture, presented as a farm-to-table revival but backed by luxury investors from the UAE and a Paris-based venture capital firm. The plan included a 5-star boutique hotel, heritage cooking school, and rebranding of the estate as a luxury Windsor destination. A commercial feasibility study from July 2025 valued North Acre Hall's licensing rights alone at over £48 million over a 10-year horizon. Camilla's motivations were not sentimental. They were strategic, aimed at legacy branding and securing economic autonomy for her son. But all of it collapsed under the Queen's decisive directive. One courtier summarized the moment. Camilla believed she had soft-bought the estate through influence. The Queen outmaneuvered her from beyond the grave. What followed was a carefully orchestrated campaign of whispers and subtle pressure, led by Camilla's longtime fixer, Maurice Loul, a retired PR consultant known for palace back-channel games. Anonymous insiders reported a surge in leaked think pieces in late 2025, suggesting the monarchy had overinvested in heritage assets and needed to recalibrate generational equity. In a final push, Tom allegedly attempted to secure a lease inquiry on the North Acre Southern Orchard Tract, claiming it was unused arable land. The request was promptly denied by the Duchy of Cornwall legal team, citing inheritance protection, sparking what one palace source called a Camilla temper crisis in November 2025. By Christmas 2025, William had formally assumed stewardship of North Acre Hall, conducting his first private visit with Princess Catherine and their children. A new high-discretion security rotation was established, and 2 trusted estate managers from William's Sandhurst circle were appointed. To the public, the transition passed almost unnoticed, like a shadow sliding across a polished floor. But inside the palace, it was nothing short of a whispered coronation, a transfer of power bound to land and legacy, invisible in law, but rooted entirely in the final, unassailable will of the late Queen herself. In the words of a senior footman who served both Elizabeth and now William, this wasn't just a house, it was the Queen's final chess move. It wasn't the grandeur of the estate that startled the family. No, it was the covenant written in Queen Elizabeth II's unmistakable hand, each looped cursive stroke deliberate and commanding. Folded 3 times and secured within a leather folio, the document bore the mark W. William George, discovered during Princess Anne's forensic review of the Queen's private correspondence at Windsor's Oak Room in mid-January 2026. This codicil, the second and final amendment to her sealed will, dated exactly 1 year before her passing, revealed a title that had long eluded public awareness. Clarence Hill Estate, nestled deep in the Chiltern Hills, reached only by a discreet private driveway stretching 4 miles from any main road. But Clarence Hill was far more than a royal retreat. It was a fortified legacy, a silent guardian of moral and dynastic continuity. The estate had been quietly purchased in 1947 by King George VI, designed as an off-book reserve for direct heirs, insulated from Parliament, public scrutiny, and the flux of royal funding. While Sandringham and Balmoral were well-known private holdings, Clarence Hill remained a secret covenant property, never rented, never mortgaged, never altered, and carefully preserved. Queen Elizabeth's directive was simple, yet profound. I entrust Clarence Hill to my grandson William, in full title and spirit, free of encumbrance, free of shadow. Let it remain outside the Crown estate, immune to politics, immune to scandal. This land is a covenant, not a commodity. Its purpose is to guard the moral line of succession. The line immune to scandal was no idle phrase. Sources indicate the Queen had grown wary of public controversies involving Prince Andrew, as well as the volatile media ventures of Prince Harry. To Elizabeth, her legacy needed moral insulation, a place untouched by gossip, profit, or social chaos. Clarence Hill would be William and Catherine's sanctuary, a strategic reserve for the family's ethical and dynastic compass. But not everyone shared that vision. Queen Camilla, upon learning of the transfer on January 20th, reportedly summoned her legal team at Highgrove alongside Tom Parker Bowles. Her son had just suffered a multi-million-pound publishing contract loss over a scandal involving his food brand's misuse of the royal crest. To Camilla, Clarence Hill wasn't sacred. It was a commercial goldmine, a perfect canvas for generational organic branding. Internal emails, later leaked, revealed her vision. Imagine the launch. From the Queen's garden to yours. By January 23rd, a proposal was already drafted under a newly registered company, Hill and Crown Limited, with Tom listed as executive director. The plan? Rebrand Clarence Hill into a boutique hospitality and agricultural brand, emphasizing regenerative luxury, climate resilience, and royal sustainability. Camilla hoped to crown Tom as the Prince of Green Britain, turning the estate into his aristocratic launchpad, grounded in soil rather than scandal. Unfortunately for Camilla and Tom, the codicil had already been notarized in the Royal Archives and legally transferred to the Duchy of Cornwall Trust before their first claim. Then came the leak on January 28th. An anonymous whistleblower, believed by some to be a former aide disillusioned with Camilla, forwarded the internal Hill and Crown deck to the Lord Chancellor's office, citing attempted commercial trespass on a sealed royal legacy. The leaked documents revealed everything: rebranding strategies, speculative luxury valuations, and mock-ups of Clarence Hill with corporate logos airbrushed over the Edwardian facade. The backlash was instant. William, furious but composed, reportedly confronted Camilla at Windsor during a private lunch intended to honour Catherine's recovery. According to sources close to the royal household, the exchange was brief, yet devastating. "Clarence Hill does not exist to be bottled, branded or sold," William reportedly said. "It is the last sanctuary of my grandmother's soul, and I will protect it like I protect my wife and children." Camilla, red-faced and tight-lipped, left without finishing her meal. Within 48 hours, Hill and Crown Limited was dissolved, and Tom withdrew from 3 public appearances citing stress-related fatigue. No formal statements were made, but behind the palace doors, Camilla remained defiant, reportedly accusing King Charles of betraying the family bloodline by allowing Elizabeth's wishes to override current familial ambitions. Charles, ever diplomatic, refused engagement, though he later confided in Princess Anne. Elizabeth always knew who would hold the crown, not just wear it. And so Clarence Hill stood, not as a symbol of profit, but as a covenant, a line in the soil even time dared not cross. In the days following the February 2nd posthumous declaration, a deceptive calm settled across the royal estates. But inside Clarence Hill, tensions simmered. Confidential reports obtained by palace staffers and shared with the Lord Chamberlain reveal that Camilla and Tom's ambitions had grown more determined, more dangerous. Camilla had been consulting a private real estate consortium, discreetly exploring options to convert Greystone Downs estate, another of Elizabeth's rural retreats in Northumberland, into a luxury wellness and heritage resort. The consortium, operating as Wessex Heritage Holdings, was backed by offshore investors with prior connections to Tom's gourmet ventures in France and Italy. Greystone Downs, inherited by Prince William under the Queen's sealed testament, had suddenly become a prime target, not for its history, but for its untapped commercial potential. The estate was a crown jewel of Elizabethan conservation, boasting over 400 acres of protected woodland, a Tudor hunting lodge dating to 1578, and a private stone chapel adorned with 17th century relics. Queen Elizabeth had spent over 4 decades preserving Greystone Downs as both a retreat and a living archive of royal moral code. Leaving it to William was symbolic. He wasn't just heir to the throne, he was heir to restraint, stewardship, and quiet dignity. To Camilla and Tom, however, the land represented opportunity, valued at £80 million, according to documents recovered from a former financial aid. Their vision? A Windsor sanctuary complete with £5,000 per night eco-lodges, curated farm-to-table dining hosted by Tom, and a members-only royal culinary circle targeting elite clientele from the UAE and East Asia. Behind the scenes, Camilla's legal liaison, Sir Piers Mallory, probed the will for any clause that might allow shared custodianship or heritage collaboration, hoping to neutralise William's exclusive control. William learned of the manoeuvre through Princess Anne, who intercepted a confidential email between Camilla's lawyer and a peer in the House of Lords. "She's not challenging the crown," Anne reportedly said coldly. "She's challenging Mother's ethics." Furious but composed, William summoned the Privy Purse for a closed-door strategy session. The scope of Camilla's campaign became even clearer as more evidence surfaced. Tom had quietly registered a new holding company in Luxembourg, Stag Crown Hospitality Limited, 3 weeks before the Queen's will was made public. The company's branding matched preliminary brochures discovered by palace aides. Plans included converting the estate's chapel into a mindfulness retreat centre and transforming stables once home to Elizabeth's prized ponies into a wellness vineyard spa. But neither Camilla nor Tom anticipated the Queen's foresight. The sealed codicil released to the Royal Archives on February 3, 2026, explicitly barred any material transformation, commercial conversion, or brand exploitation of Greystone Downs without the express approval of William himself. The clause, written in the Queen's hand and notarized in 2021, was a direct rebuke to Camilla's whisper campaign, suggesting Elizabeth had not truly favoured William. The revelation stunned everyone. Camilla, according to a footman who served during the confrontation, tore open an envelope bearing the Queen's monogram, read it twice in silence, and muttered, "Even in death, she leaves me caged." William remained silent. His only public gesture came on February 5th, when he made an unscheduled visit to Greystone Downs, accompanied by Princess Catherine and their 3 children. Cameras captured the Wales family walking along the frozen edge of the estate's lake at sunset, a quiet but powerful affirmation that Elizabeth's legacy was safe and her grandson was its protector. Morning broke over Windsor Great Park on the 3rd of February, 2026, pale sunlight spilling across frost-kissed hedgerows, the kind of quiet that makes the world seem still, but only to those who are not paying attention. Inside the palace, the stillness was deceptive. It hummed with the low electric tension of anticipation, strategy, and old rivalries rearing their heads in shadows. William walked slowly, almost meditatively, through the cedar-lined pathways, his hand extended to brush against the treetops, pointing to the delicate frost on the branches as if imparting wisdom to George, who bounced along beside him, eyes wide with curiosity. Questions tumbled from George's lips in a near-constant stream, about the chapel that loomed on the distant hill, about the twisted paths that led to hidden groves, about the history of the estate itself. Charlotte walked beside them, clutching a leather-bound journal so tightly it seemed to pulse with importance in her small hands. Her gaze darted from her father to the paths ahead, and back again, absorbing every detail. William's calm, patient responses carried the weight of history and responsibility. This estate was not for sale, not for display, and certainly not for speculation. It was home, it was legacy, and it was fiercely, unambiguously protected. Yet, despite the serene tableau, the struggle was far from over. Camilla, whose ambitions were matched only by her patience and her tenacity, was quietly mobilizing behind the scenes. Tom Parker Bowles, ever loyal to his mother and ever ambitious himself, was reportedly exploring legal avenues under the guise of undue influence over the late Queen in her final years. What had begun as a personal inheritance, a gift from a grandmother to her grandson, the continuation of a carefully cultivated royal line, was rapidly escalating into a battlefield of law, ethics, and power. This was a fight not merely over land, but over the soul of the monarchy itself, a contest of legacy versus ambition, of duty versus desire. Greenheath Estate, a sprawling tract just southeast of Forest Lodge, was no ordinary holding. Unlike Forest Lodge, whose symbolic significance was largely ceremonial, Greenheath was a tangible prize, a vast swath of undeveloped woodland spanning over 500 acres, bordering a historic Roman road that whispered of centuries past. Protected under a royal conservation deed, it had long been viewed by insiders as a potential site for high-level retreats, secure diplomatic gatherings, and even world-class rehabilitation programs under royal patronage. Camilla coveted it, and she wanted it with a determination that bordered on obsession. Her planning had commenced almost immediately after Queen Elizabeth's passing. Misreading the sealed section of Elizabeth's will, Camilla assumed it referred to a ceremonial plot or unused hunting grounds. She was wrong. Greenheath was accompanied by a £37 million private trust, carefully seeded through decades of strategic transfers approved by the Queen herself, quietly building a financial buffer alongside its symbolic value. The discovery of this fund enraged Tom Parker Bowles. Sources revealed that he had long envisioned a media-branded culinary wellness centre, a combination luxury retreat and gastronomic playground on the land, backed by 2 Dubai investors and a French spa conglomerate. Camilla allegedly promised Tom she would use her regency privilege to secure royal endorsement. While King Charles remained semi-retired and often indisposed, she reportedly lined up a full-scale PR campaign, presenting the venture as a form of national healing in the aftermath of Brexit and COVID. Promotional dinners featuring organic wines, locally sourced produce, and Dutchy olive oils were planned to showcase the initiative to elite society and foreign dignitaries alike. But fate, guided by Elizabeth's foresight, intervened. By late January, when Camilla attempted to activate the necessary trust paperwork, it was too late. On January 30th, Princess Anne, acting on behalf of the Crown Trust Authority, sealed the asset transfer, backdated to December 28, 2025. William officially received full rights to Greenheath, solidifying a quiet but absolute posthumous assertion of Elizabeth's authority. That evening, a royal black sedan was photographed entering Clarence's house, delivering the final documents along with a private audio recording of the Queen herself, explaining her wishes. Greenheath was to become a secure legacy zone, reserved solely for environmental education programs, child rehabilitation initiatives, and educational stewardship under the direct patronage of William and Catherine. Camilla's fury was immediate. She summoned Tom and 2 of her private estate lawyers to a crisis meeting at Rommel House. According to palace leaks, the discussion turned almost instantly to legal manoeuvring. Camilla was prepared to challenge Elizabeth's mental clarity at the time of the Greenheath deed, claiming that William and Catherine, aided by media bias and influential advisers, had manipulated the Queen. It was a posthumous attack on Elizabeth herself, an audacious attempt to rewrite history and usurp her authority. The palace moved swiftly. Within 48 hours, King Charles, despite frailty, issued a private warning. Any attempt to undermine Elizabeth's will would be treated as sedition against the Crown's memory. When the letter leaked to the Times on February 2nd, public outrage erupted. Pro-monarchy groups, royal historians, and constitutional scholars denounced the plot as morally and legally indefensible. Princess Catherine's silent presence at a Windsor children's hospice that same day added weight to the narrative, her dignity and compassion serving as a counterpoint to Camilla's scheming. William acted decisively. At 9:46 a.m. on February 3rd, he arrived at the Greenheath gates in a simple navy wool coat, accompanied by only a single aide. No cameras, no press, no fanfare. He signed the inaugural charter of the Greenheath Royal Future Trust, permanently closing the estate to commercial exploitation and codifying it under a new ethical framework, mirroring Elizabeth's environmental and educational vision. As the ceremony concluded, a Rolls-Royce appeared at the western boundary. Camilla stepped out, her dark glasses shielding her eyes, lips pressed tight, a black leather folder clutched to her chest. She did not speak. She did not approach. She merely observed, silent and restrained, the unfolding of a vision she could not claim. Tom never appeared. By evening, multiple news outlets confirmed that Camilla had cancelled a royal culinary event scheduled for February 4th, and her PR team issued a single, carefully worded line. Her Majesty Queen Camilla regrets the recent developments and supports the King's reaffirmation of the late Queen's legacy. Though the immediate battle for Greenheath had ended, the cracks within Windsor were wider than ever. Later that morning, a sealed leather envelope marked with Elizabeth II's royal cipher was formally presented to Prime Minister Harriet Shawcross, confirming the transfer of Oakridge Estate to William. Oakridge, kept long out of public view, was a private holding under a unique clause in the Queen's will. Unlike Balmoral or Sandringham, Oakridge was not bound by Crown Estate regulations. It was a fortress of pastoral retreat, an untouched expanse bordering the Thames, forests used by George VI for hunting, and ruins of a Tudor chapel hidden within its grounds. Its estimated value, £118 million, was secondary to its symbolic meaning. Oakridge had been Elizabeth's personal hearth during family disputes, a place of refuge and reflection, and the cradle of William's early summers. One final journal entry, tucked beside pressed lavender, spoke to future stewardship and the care of legacy. Even as the transfer was completed, Camilla and Tom remained silent. Whispers circulated about a possible legal appeal via the Privy Purse Committee, claiming Oakridge had historically benefited from public funds and could be reclassified. William, anticipating such manoeuvres, ordered a full review of restoration logs and security payments dating back to 1953. Forensic accountants under the Sovereign Grant Audit Unit began cross-checking each line, each expense, each receipt. Elizabeth had foreseen every eventuality. The private will contained a clause called anticipatory obstruction, nullifying any challenge to Oakridge by individuals outside the Windsor line or married before 2010. When read to senior royals in the green drawing room, silence fell. Camilla stormed out, Tom cursed his lawyers, and Princess Anne quietly remarked to Charles, "I always knew this day would come." As evening fell, William, Catherine and their 3 children toured Oakridge for the first time as stewards. George asked, standing atop the old watchtower ruins, "Will this be ours forever?" William's calm reply echoed through the frosty evening air, "As long as we protect it." Finally, a letter arrived from the late Queen's personal solicitor, Sir Jonathan Arbery. "If ever this estate is challenged, Oakridge belongs not to power, but to patience. Let the one who bore the weight of the Crown's future, not the burden of entitlement, carry it forward." Signed Elizabeth R. The words were short, but devastating. Camilla's ambitions were crushed. Tom's commercial schemes silenced. For William, it was not merely inheritance. It was trust fulfilled, a sovereign's command, and a future sealed. William gently guiding his children through the estates, showing them the groves, chapels, and hidden glades, conveyed a singular, enduring message. Legacy is measured not in wealth or influence, but in stewardship, integrity, and courage. Like, comment, and subscribe to witness every unfolding chapter as William and Catherine defend their estates, honour the late Queen's wishes, and safeguard the future of the monarchy. With one move, King Charles stepped away from the Sussex fight and pushed the whole mess onto Prince William and Princess Anne. From that moment on, any future talks about titles, money, or royal standing were no longer his direct problem. While the public watched solemn plans unfold for the centenary of Queen Elizabeth II's birth, Charles was carrying 2 crushing burdens at once: his health battle and the never-ending Sussex storm. The king was worn down, plain and simple. He formally passed control of Sussex-related matters to the Prince of Wales and the Princess Royal, making it clear where the real operational power now sat. Charles wanted his energy fixed on one major thing only: honouring his late mother's 100th birth anniversary. That moment was bigger than family tension. It was meant to reinforce unity, history, and the Crown's legitimacy at a fragile time for the monarchy. With Charles giving the nod, a harder royal line began to form under William, backed strongly by Anne and supported by Prince Edward. Their mission was sharp and blunt: tighten discipline around royal titles, and stop anything that could turn the monarchy into a marketplace. William has long believed that using royal rank to sell podcasts, lifestyle products, or polished humanitarian appearances for private gain crosses a line that should never be crossed. In his view, Harry and Meghan want the shine of royalty without the duty that gives that shine meaning. He sees that setup as the exact opposite of public service. That is why the March 2026 summit reportedly ended with a fresh directive involving tighter audits, stronger restrictions, and much less tolerance. Charles did not block it. He backed it, and by the end of March 2026, William and Anne had reportedly been authorised to put that harder approach into action. A major meeting then took place at Windsor Castle with William, Anne, and senior advisors in the room. Reports circulating at the time described William as furious behind closed doors. He allegedly argued that the continued use of royal titles in commercial branding, especially when tied to the children's prince and princess styling, pushed the monarchy into dangerous territory. In his eyes, it risked turning public honours into private tools, and that was something he was no longer willing to shrug off. As April 2026 moved closer, William's frustration seemed to harden into a full doctrine of royal protection. Palace insiders and press reports claimed he had started treating the Sussex brand operation in America and their coming Australia trip as a direct institutional challenge to William. Using royal identity to add weight to business moves or private ventures was not some harmless branding trick. It was a serious misuse of something inherited through centuries of service and sacrifice. He reportedly believes royal titles are not cute accessories or flashy family labels to slap onto deals. They carry public meaning, they come from the sovereign, and historically, they are tied to duty, restraint, and constitutional responsibility. So if those titles are used to lift products, polish media projects, or give extra status to commercial ventures, William is said to view it as a deep betrayal of what the crown is supposed to stand for. The first big test of that tougher strategy appeared to be Australia. As Harry and Meghan prepared for a high-profile April 2026 visit, they were said to have run into something far colder than expected. Under his new authority, William reportedly reached out through diplomatic and Commonwealth channels with a very direct message. Harry and Meghan were travelling as private individuals, not as representatives of the King, the United Kingdom, or the Commonwealth. That message was meant to shut down any confusion before it even started. William reportedly wanted no official welcomes, no state-style treatment, no military flourishes, and no ceremonial staging that could make the trip look like a royal tour. His view, according to insiders, was brutally simple. If Harry and Meghan wanted to move like celebrities, then they should be handled like celebrities. No royal glow, no palace shield, no borrowed prestige. This was bigger than a family grudge, and that is what makes it hit harder. It was reportedly a deliberate attempt to stop the same kind of blurred lines that critics said appeared during earlier overseas visits, including Nigeria and Colombia. William's camp seemed determined to make one thing crystal clear. There would be no more room for soft-focus confusion about status. Working royals serve the institution. Private citizens do not get the same treatment just because the headlines still love a royal angle. But the coldest edge of this strategy was said to involve the future of Harry and Meghan's children's titles. Charles had long been seen as more hesitant on that front, especially as a grandfather. William, however, was reportedly looking at the issue with far less emotion and far more institutional calculation. Observers have suggested he studied the Andrew precedent closely, noting how the removal of military roles and HRH status became the cleanest way to separate a damaged figure from the working monarchy. That is why insiders said the warning to Montecito was no joke. If the children's titles continued to appear in ways that fueled public controversy, brand confusion, or media warfare, William could eventually advise a far more formal response once the power fully rested with him. Reports claimed he was especially angered by coverage that painted him as hostile toward his brother's children. From his side, that was not just offensive gossip. It was seen as an attack on his character and a threat to the monarchy's stability. In quieter but still telling ways, the palace also appeared to be drawing a hard constitutional line. Meghan's late 2025 remark that, "I am a Sussex, it's our shared name," may have played well in lifestyle branding language. But palace structures do not run on brand slogans. Under William's guidance, officials were said to be sticking firmly to formal royal house rules, documentation standards, and the refusal to attach diplomatic privilege to private commercial travel. That sent a message all by itself. The message was sharp, even if it was delivered without shouting. Whatever titles appeared in interviews, magazine pieces, or promotional coverage, they did not automatically carry force in the eyes of the British state. William reportedly wanted that distinction locked in and impossible to spin away. In other words, press language and constitutional reality were not the same thing, and he intended to make sure everyone, from the media to foreign officials, understood that loud and clear. His whole approach can be summed up by a vow he reportedly made during that March summit. He would draw a very hard line and never again allow media chaos to explode around his family. For William, this is not only about Harry. It is about Catherine and their children too. It is about shielding George, Charlotte, and Louis from what he sees as years of damage, distraction, and relentless PR crossfire. That is why he has tried to build what insiders call a steel wall around the future of the monarchy. He wants the next generation, especially George as future king, to inherit something steady, disciplined and respected, not a circus driven by celebrity tactics and never-ending drama. And as the royal calendar moved towards summer 2026, that steel wall stopped being a private feeling and started looking like official strategy. For generations, the summer season had been one of the monarchy's most symbolic rhythms, trooping the colour in public, Balmoral in private, duty followed by retreat. Those traditions once acted like glue for the House of Windsor, but under William's rising authority, summer 2026 was reportedly being redesigned into something much harsher for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, a season of total exclusion. That shift reportedly began at a tense family summit in late March. Charles may have still held a father's wish to see Archie and Lilibet, and perhaps open the door to a Highland visit, but William, Anne and Edward were said to have pushed back as a solid bloc. Their argument was that any Sussex presence on British soil during that period would threaten the security, calm and dignity surrounding both the King's recovery and the Queen's centenary preparations. This is where that phrase, steel wall, really took hold. Royal insiders used it, and later reports echoed it, to describe the barrier William and Catherine had built around the monarchy's core. Not just emotional distance, not just hurt feelings, but a full system of security control, media containment, and physical separation. Sources said William instructed protection teams to treat any private Sussex visit the way they would handle any other high-profile non-working celebrity. No shared security bubble, no access to royal homes, no casual arrivals, no easy entry points. And at the centre of that wall stands Catherine, who insiders say has had enough after years of public fallout and repeated drama. Reports suggest she fully backed William's decision to cut remaining ties, convinced that any renewed contact would only reopen damage that never truly healed. That is the state of play now. Not a temporary chill, not a passing disagreement, but a hardened position shaped by the belief that the monarchy can only protect itself by refusing to let the old chaos back in. What really locked that steel wall into place was one cold reality. Meghan could not be allowed to use even the appearance of peace with Catherine to polish her image in America again. During the March 2026 meeting, when King Charles carefully floated the idea of a Balmoral family gathering, William's response was said to be fierce. Insiders claimed he viewed the idea as complete madness, because bringing back the same couple after years of public fallout would only drag the family straight into another headline storm. William's position was described as blunt and strategic, not emotional. He reportedly argued that Harry and Meghan no longer arrive as private family members. Their presence brings cameras, commentary, speculation, and a fresh wave of noise that pulls focus from the Crown's actual constitutional work. He also pointed to the security contradiction around Harry. Harry continues to challenge his security arrangements, yet still appears to expect the treatment given to a senior royal. William's line was simple: it cannot work both ways. If Harry wants life as a private citizen, then he lives like one. If he wants royal standing, then he accepts royal limits. Since that balance is gone, the steel wall stays up. That mood reportedly hardened even more after the Sussex-friendly coverage in Harper's Bazaar. The articles focused on Harry's concerns over his children's titles and framed William as cold, calculating, and unyielding. But inside palace circles, those stories were not seen as harmless features. They were seen as another pressure play. To William, according to sources, it looked like the same old pattern. Family conflict pushed into glossy American media to stir sympathy and pressure the king into backing down. That is why William's reported private vow now feels like the palace rulebook. I vowed I would never let media drama happen to my family. That promise is said to be shaping every move. He reportedly sees stories like those as attempts to force Charles into a softer position through public emotion. Instead of bending, William answered with distance. The message to Montecito was sharp. Those media tactics no longer carry weight here, and every new exclusive only pushes another royal door further shut. Balmoral then became the biggest symbol of all. For decades, Balmoral was the family's safe place, the one royal space tied most closely to Queen Elizabeth II's private comfort and peace. So keeping the Sussexes away from Balmoral in 2026 was not just about blocking one summer visit. It was about reclaiming that ground for the working royals and keeping it free from cameras, leaks, and PR angles. Reports suggested the directive was strict: no cameras, no extra Sussex-linked guests, and no loose access. The Highlands, in this version, were for service and silence, not spectacle and spin. That move also killed any faint hope of a photo-driven reunion with the king. William reportedly understands exactly how valuable a single image could be. One photo of Harry beside Charles at Balmoral could bounce around the world in hours and become gold for future media use. By refusing even that chance, William was cutting off one of the Sussex brand's last powerful tools: visible royal closeness. No photo meant no easy redemption arc, no emotional jackpot, and no instant PR lift. When word of the ban reached California, the reaction was reportedly disbelief. The Sussex side was said to have counted on Charles's softer instincts, especially while his health remained a sensitive subject. What they did not seem to expect was that Charles had already allowed William to take the harder line. That changed the whole mood. The steel wall was no longer just an awkward silence or a missing invitation. It had become a full shutdown, with no casual calls, no relaxed video chats, and no quiet back-channel bargaining. The message was loud without needing to be spoken. Windsor was closed. But while that family freeze was deepening, another battle was starting to hit even harder, and this one was all about money, trust, and reputation. In late March 2026, Tom Bower reportedly released a new book titled Betrayal: The Financial Undermining of the Crown. Unlike earlier work that focused more on Meghan's ambition or Harry's mindset, this one reportedly aimed at the last part of Harry's public image that still carried real respect: his charity legacy. That is why the accusations landed with such force. The biggest claims centered on Symbolic, the charity Harry co-founded in 2006 to support children and young people affected by HIV and AIDS in Lesotho and Botswana. According to the book, the issue was not simply that Harry had stepped away from royal duties. The darker allegation was that donor attention once linked to Symbolic had allegedly been steered toward Sussex-linked projects instead. If true, that would mean one of Harry's most respected causes was being weakened, while newer California ventures gained shine. Critics described that possibility as deeply damaging, because it turns a reputation problem into a moral one. Bower also reportedly tied that wider concern to the departure of former Symbolic chief executive Sophie Chandauka. Publicly, her exit was framed as routine, but the book suggested deeper internal tension. It claimed she had pushed for stronger financial scrutiny and clearer answers, only to face resistance. In that version of events, questions about money and oversight were not welcomed, and her departure helped keep a bigger mess from spilling out into public view. Whether fully proven or not, those claims added fresh heat to the argument that Harry's most credible charitable work had been dragged into controversy. Then the book returned to another old wound that still follows Meghan everywhere: the fallout with Thomas Markle. For years, Meghan's version has been that her father let her down through staged paparazzi pictures before the wedding. But Bower reportedly pushed a much harsher theory. He claimed the situation was more complicated than the public had been led to believe, and suggested Meghan's past familiarity with photographer Jeff Rayner and the Coleman Rayner agency raised bigger questions. In that reading, what looked like simple family embarrassment may have also served a strategic purpose: creating a clean reason to cut Thomas out before the royal wedding chaos exploded further. That is exactly why these allegations reportedly landed in palace circles as confirmation, not shock. William and Anne were said to see them as more proof that their hard line was justified. William gave no public statement, but sources claimed he was disturbed without being surprised. From that point of view, the issue was no longer just gossip, hurt feelings, or press drama. It was about protecting the monarchy's charitable image and stopping any Sussex-linked controversy from spilling onto institutions that depend on public trust. And that is where the steel wall took on a bigger meaning. It stopped being only a family barrier and became a shield around the Crown's moral brand. Once critics began using labels like grifter and questioning how royal connections were being used, the whole fight moved into more dangerous territory. This was no longer just Windsor family friction. It became a fight over credibility, philanthropy, and who still looked like they were serving something bigger than themselves. That contrast only became sharper as Buckingham Palace prepared for Queen Elizabeth II's centenary and the spotlight shifted toward Australia. On one side stood the old royal model: restraint, duty, continuity, and public service. On the other stood what critics describe as the Sussex model: branding, monetization, emotion, and premium image building. Meghan's Coming Her Best Life event became the flashpoint. Marketed as a luxury retreat for empowered women, it looked glamorous on the surface, but many critics said the optics were rough. With tickets reportedly priced around $3,000, the event was slammed by some as badly out of touch during a time of inflation and housing pressure. That is why William and Anne reportedly see it as the perfect contrast, because while Catherine's public work is framed around early childhood, social programs, research, and broad access, Meghan's polished Australian stage has come to symbolise the exact opposite of the grounded, community-centred approach they believe should define Catherine's public role. What made this moment look so damaging was the growing sense that Meghan had swapped duty for dollars, turning royal status into something that looked less like service and more like a luxury brand for sale. That image hit especially hard in Australia, where public frustration reportedly exploded fast. By late March, a petition with more than 35,000 signatures had been delivered to the Australian government, demanding that not 1 cent of taxpayer money be used to support what many critics saw as a private Sussex business trip. That public backlash forced a quick response from Montecito. A Sussex spokesperson reportedly dismissed the petition as a non-issue and insisted the trip was privately funded. But on the ground in Sydney, the story looked far messier. Reports claimed that despite the private label, police, federal security teams, canine units, and drone surveillance still had to be mobilised because of the couple's high-profile security risk. And that is exactly what set people off. Because even if the event was being sold as private, many believed the public was still being asked to carry part of the cost. That security question became the heart of the outrage. Critics argued that Australian taxpayers should not be left covering the fallout of a trip tied to private profit. Inside palace circles, Prince William was said to be watching the reaction with cold satisfaction. By reportedly making it clear through Australian contacts that Harry and Meghan held no official role, he removed any room for soft confusion. They were not arriving as working royals. They were arriving as celebrity figures using royal titles in a private setting. That commercial versus constitutional split is now the sharpest line in this whole drama. William's strategy appears to be simple and ruthless. Let Meghan's own business choices tell the story. By letting the Her Best Life tour go forward in all its glossy, expensive corporate style, he did not need to attack it. The optics did the work on their own. Critics pounced on the contrast, saying it looked wild to speak about compassion and empowerment while charging what some called the price of a used car for a hotel ballroom event. So by April 2026, Meghan's public image seemed to be walking straight into a reputational storm. The 35,000 signature petition, the steel wall in London, and the wider criticism around the Sussex brand all hit at once. What may once have looked like a glamorous comeback now looked more like a warning sign. The Australian trip no longer felt like a royal-style return. It looked like a case study in what happens when a British royal title gets folded into a high-end commercial lifestyle pitch. And in that brutal battle of optics, Catherine came out looking stronger than ever. Her image stayed tied to service, patience, and public duty, while Meghan's looked increasingly tied to branding, exclusivity, and premium access. That contrast told the whole story in one brutal line. You may be able to market a title, but you cannot buy the respect that title was supposed to earn through service. As spring 2026 moved toward summer, the monarchy itself seemed to be crossing into something much bigger than a family feud. What once looked like a messy internal clash now felt like a full institutional break. The moves, shaped by Prince William, with the backing of King Charles and Princess Anne, had reportedly pushed the Sussex issue out of the emotional zone and into formal containment. That shift matters, because the palace was no longer reacting to drama. It was building permanent distance from it. The steel wall no longer looked temporary at all. It now seemed like part of the future design of the House of Windsor. In 2026, Harry and Meghan's royal identity, once their biggest advantage, appeared to be losing strength because the institution behind it had stopped feeding it prestige. That is the colder truth sitting underneath all this noise. A title only stays powerful when the palace, the state, and the public still agree to treat it like it matters. What William has shown through this crisis is a leadership style that looks hard, modern, and completely unsentimental. He appears willing to put the crown's long-term stability ahead of blood ties, and that is a major signal about the kind of king he may become. By giving William room to handle so much of the Sussex problem, Charles effectively handed his heir a live test of sovereign authority. This was not just family cleanup. It looked like preparation for the throne. William's approach seems to rest on one blunt idea: the monarchy cannot survive if it tolerates confusion, dilution, or half-in and half-out arrangements. In his view, you are either serving the institution or living as a private citizen. There is no Sussex middle lane anymore. That is why the palace's silence has become so powerful. It has not needed loud public attacks. The distance itself has said enough, and every closed door has carried more force than another argument ever could. At the same time, Charles's focus on Queen Elizabeth II's centenary sends a message of its own. It anchors the monarchy in continuity, memory, and dignity, while carefully stepping around the chaos connected to his younger son. That is a smart and symbolic move, because it ties the institution to its strongest legacy, instead of letting current controversy dominate the story. Looking toward the rest of 2026, the Sussex brand appears to be facing a real identity problem. A title without the full palace machine behind it starts losing value fast. The Sydney petition was not just a protest over security costs. It looked like a public vote of no confidence in the Sussex claim to lasting royal prestige. Meanwhile, William and Catherine have increasingly been framed as the monarchy's steady centre, and that contrast has only made them look stronger. So the institutional divorce of 2026 may be remembered as the moment the monarchy finally stopped chasing celebrity drama and chose distance instead. William made sure Queen Elizabeth II's centenary stayed a moment of national dignity, not a backdrop for spectacle. The message from London now feels final. The palace doors are shut, the old access is fading, and the steel wall is standing firm. For the first time in 6 years, Buckingham Palace's silence no longer looks weak. It looks controlled, deliberate, and absolutely unshakable. Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more royal updates.
I took her up somewhere nice in Kenya and proposed.
It's very romantic. There's a true romantic in that.
There is.
The palace fell into silence before the day truly began. The morning sun over Windsor rose slowly through a thin veil of pale mist, its light brushing against the palace's ancient stone like a hesitant hand, unsure whether it was welcome. This was meant to be an ordinary day, one shaped by calm routines, familiar schedules, and the gentle rhythm of royal order. Yet the air already felt uneasy. Something was wrong, and no one needed words to know it. The stillness inside the palace carried weight, the kind of silence that holds its breath and refuses to exhale. Long corridors, once alive with the quiet hum of staff and the soft echo of polished shoes, now felt frozen, suspended in time. Footsteps softened instinctively. Whispers lingered too long, and even the ticking of the grandfather clock in the west corridor seemed reluctant to break the air. Royal aides moved with restrained urgency. They glanced toward closed doors, avoided questions they knew they could not answer for days, and kept their faces carefully neutral. Beyond the palace walls, speculation rolled outward like a restless tide. News agencies waited. Royal correspondents piled up. Loyal supporters across the world held on for any word about the Princess of Wales. The palace issued its statements with practiced precision, carefully phrased, brief, composed. Yet inside, the atmosphere told a very different story. Behind the polished language and formal reassurances, a quiet dread had taken hold that no official wording could hide. Catherine, beloved by millions, had been in hospital care for several weeks. The public was told she was recovering, resting, surrounded by family, but the truth within the palace walls was far more fragile. Doctors moved in and out of her private suite with solemn precision, their expressions guarded, their movements deliberate. The medical wing, normally hidden from view, became the heart of a kingdom's worry. Prince William had not left her side for long stretches of time. He spent hours pacing hospital corridors, phone clenched tightly in his hand, glancing at every message as if one might bring a miracle or a sudden change. Those closest to him noticed the shift immediately. He barely spoke unless necessary, his words measured and sparse. Sleep only came when exhaustion forced it, and even then it was shallow and restless. His life narrowed to one purpose alone: to be near her, to hope, to pray, and to wait. There was something quietly devastating in the way he carried himself. To the outside world, he remained composed, dutiful, stoic, and steady, every inch the pillar of the monarchy. But in private, the mask had begun to crack, and the weight of it all showed through. The strain was visible in his eyes that once held calm assurance now carried fatigue and fear. The voice that had led ceremonies and speeches with confidence now faltered whenever he spoke her name aloud. The morning of that fateful day began like all the others, until it didn't. A nurse appeared at the far end of the hallway, her posture professional, her expression serene, yet her eyes betrayed the tremor beneath. She approached slowly, respectfully, and stopped before him. "She's asking for you, Your Royal Highness." It was a simple sentence, but in that instant, time lost its order. The world outside, the press, the ceremonies, and the expectations all ceased to exist. There was only the room beyond the door. William rose quietly, his breath shallow. He had walked through many doors in his life, into council chambers, war zones, and grand halls filled with history. None had ever felt as daunting as this one. As he stepped inside, the muted hum of medical machinery filled the air. Life reduced to steady digital pulses and measured rhythms. Catherine lay in her bed, her face pale, yet radiant in a way only she could be. Grace had always followed her like sunlight. Even in the darkest places, it never left her. She turned her head and smiled faintly when she saw him. That same smile that had once charmed the world, now holding no fear, only peace. William took her hand. It was cool, delicate, yet firm with a quiet strength that spoke louder than words. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Their silence said everything words could not. The man who had stood before nations now found himself powerless before the woman he loved. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper. "My love," she said, "promise me you will keep smiling for them." Each word seemed to carve itself into the air. He frowned slightly, not yet understanding. "For who?" he asked gently. "For the people," she replied, her voice trembling but steady in spirit. "They need to see hope in your eyes, even when I am gone." The word gone hung between them. Fragile, final, heavy. William's chest tightened. He had known this moment might come, but knowing and accepting were not the same. "Don't speak like that," he whispered, pressing her hand to his lips. "You're getting stronger." But Catherine only smiled again, a slow, knowing smile that reached her eyes. "You've always been my strength," she said softly, "and I have always been your peace." Her words broke him in ways no public tragedy ever could. Sensing the sanctity of the moment, the nurse slipped quietly out of the room. The morning light filtered through the hospital window, bathing Catherine in gold, the kind of light that belongs to memories. She looked at him with calm determination. "I want you to tell the children stories," she murmured. "Keep them laughing. Let them feel joy when they think of me. I don't want their hearts to remember sadness." William swallowed hard, his voice trembling. Catherine, please. She reached up, brushing his cheek gently. We both know some goodbyes begin long before they are spoken, she said. But this is not the end, she continued. When you see George smile, when Charlotte sings, when Louis laughs at your silly jokes, remember my love. I am there. He closed his eyes, tears finally tracing down his face. For years he had been taught that emotion must never break through the armor of duty. But in that moment, duty was irrelevant. All that mattered was love, the kind that transcends titles, crowns, and kingdoms. She paused, her breath shallow, her gaze still tender. Heaven has its own way of staying near, she whispered. And then came silence. Not the kind that feels empty, the kind that carries weight, the kind that lingers because it holds something eternal. William bowed his head, his body shaking quietly. The only sound in the room was the faint hum of machines and the muffled toll of the palace clock striking 12. Outside, the kingdom continued in motion, unaware that within these walls its future had shifted. He pressed his forehead to her hand. Whispering promises meant only for her, apologies, memories woven through tears. When he finally stood, his shoulders were heavy, his heart fractured, but still beating, because even in death, she had left him purpose. As he walked back through the corridor, the nurse stood waiting. Their eyes met, and no words were needed. The silence returned, deeper this time, spreading through the palace like a shroud. Beyond the stone walls, the world still believed in recovery, in hope, in another official update. But within Windsor, everyone knew something sacred had ended. For the first time in a long while, the palace felt different. Its portraits, its chandeliers, its endless echoes of lineage felt heartbreak, like any ordinary home that had just lost someone irreplaceable. The room remained still. The kind of stillness that seems to hold its breath between two worlds. Medical staff stayed in the outer corridor, and even the beeping of the monitors felt gentler, as though the machines themselves understood they were intruding on something sacred. Prince William remained by Catherine's bedside, motionless except for the tightening of his fingers around hers. He wanted to say something, anything, but his throat felt locked. Every word seemed too small, too fragile to carry the weight of what lingered unspoken between them. She looked at him for a long moment, as if memorizing his face. The strength in her gaze was unmistakable. This was the woman who had stood beside him through public storms and private uncertainty, through endless ceremonies and quiet laughter at home, balancing crown and motherhood with grace. "Do you remember," she asked softly, "the first time we brought George to the balcony?" William nodded, managing a faint smile. "You told me not to wave too much," he said, "or he'd think it was a game." A light laugh escaped her lips, delicate and fading quickly. "You did wave too much," she whispered. "You always tried to make him laugh, even when the world was watching." Her hand trembled in his, and he steadied it gently. The smallness of the moment felt enormous beyond those walls. A shared memory of laughter, so private and fragile, carried the weight of a nation already bracing for news. Outside, people waited. Inside, two souls clung to pieces of an ordinary life that once felt eternal. "Promise me," Catherine said after a pause, her voice thinner now, "that you'll never let them forget the sound of laughter in this house." The words landed gently, but they cut deep. William closed his eyes. "I promise," he said, his voice breaking despite himself. She smiled faintly, quiet satisfaction softening her features, easing the sharp lines of pain. "You've always been good at keeping promises," she added, "except the one about taking fewer night calls." He almost laughed through the tears. "You never let me forget that, did you?" Her eyes drifted toward the ceiling as the morning light shifted to gold. "I am not afraid," she said suddenly. "I thought I would be, but I'm not." The words struck him like a blow. "Catherine," she turned to him, her gaze calm, almost luminous. "I've seen too much goodness to fear what comes next. I've seen it in you, in the children, in the people we've met. That's what I want you to hold on to." He shook his head, tears streaming freely now. "Don't talk like this. We'll find another way. There's still hope." "There is always hope," she said softly. "But sometimes it looks different than we expect." Her eyes drifted toward the window. Sunlight played against the glass, and for a moment she seemed far away, as if already seeing beyond the walls, beyond the pain. "You once told me," she murmured, "that love makes us brave." "You were right," he could barely breathe. "You made me brave," he said. Silence followed, gentle, heavy, eternal. She looked at him again, her lips moving faintly. He leaned closer. "Promise me something else," she whispered. "Anything," he said instantly. "When you smile in public," she said, "don't let it be for duty. Let it be for life. Let it be because you still believe in what we began together." William pressed her hand against his chest. "I don't know how to do any of this without you." Her fingers moved weakly, brushing against his. "You already do," she said. "You just haven't seen it yet." A faint shiver passed through her body. Her breathing slowed. Every second felt suspended, stretched thin between now and forever. He wanted to call for the doctors, to stop time, to beg for one more hour, but she met his eyes and gave a small shake of her head. "Stay," she whispered. He stayed. She smiled again, that soft, radiant smile the world had fallen in love with. "Tell the children," she said, pausing to gather strength, "that I love them beyond words, that no distance can ever take that away. And when they're older," she continued, "tell them I saw heaven in their laughter." William's heart broke quietly. He bent his head against her hand. "I'll tell them," he whispered. The clock outside struck once, a quiet toll marking the moment between breath and eternity. Catherine's eyes began to close, her voice thinning to little more than air. "When you see the children smile," she whispered, "you will see me. And when the world feels too heavy, remember, my love, that heaven has its own way of staying near." Her words lingered in the still air, fragile, eternal. William's tears fell freely now, unchecked. He had wept before, but never like this, never with the helplessness of a man who would give everything for one more heartbeat. He kissed her forehead, whispering words only she could hear. "I love you, always." For a brief instant, her fingers tightened in his, a final echo of life, of connection. Then her hand grew still. The machines hummed softly. Morning light spilled fully across her face. William bowed his head and wept, quietly, reverently, human grief that did not seek witnesses. A nurse entered silently, her face composed, her eyes wet. She looked at William, then at the still figure of the princess, and gently drew the curtain. Outside, the palace clock struck again. The chime carried across the courtyard. Life continued, unchanged as it always had, but within those walls, the world had shifted forever. William remained seated, holding her hand long after the room had emptied. His tears dried, leaving behind the quiet ache of something sacred gone. He looked at her one last time, memorizing the serenity on her face, the faint trace of peace, as if she had only drifted into rest. When he finally rose, the nurse waited by the doorway, offering a folded cloth. He nodded but said nothing. Words no longer felt adequate. He walked into the corridor where the royal physician stood waiting. The man bowed respectfully, murmured something William barely heard, and turned away. Every step down that corridor felt heavier than the last. He passed portraits of ancestors, monarchs, soldiers, queens, all framed in gilded silence. For the first time, he felt the unbearable loneliness of legacy, the crown, the lineage, the destiny. None of it could mend what he had just lost. At the chapel corridor, he paused. He turned once more toward the room behind him, his voice barely audible, meant only for the walls. "Good night, my darling." And with that, the future king stepped into the longest night of his life. The aftermath unfolded within the walls, corridors never meant to carry grief, only ceremony and history. That morning, they carried silence. Silence like fog drifting through old stone and polished wood. Servants moved softly, unsure whether to speak or bow, as if even acknowledgement might disturb the fragile air. Prince William sat alone in the chapel, the faint scent of candles mixed with cold marble and ancient prayers. His military jacket lay beside him, forgotten. The crown fell away. He was simply a man mourning his wife. Light filtered through stained glass, crimson and blue spilling across the pews like a painting of sorrow. He did not cry loudly. His grief was internal, the kind that settles into the bones and refuses to leave. No one approached him. Even courtiers who had served generations stood uncertain. Finally, Queen Camilla entered. Her steps were soft, her face pale but steady. She said nothing at first, only rested a gentle hand on his shoulder. She was light, William murmured. Every room she entered felt alive. Camilla's eyes glistened as she nodded, and she still is. Light doesn't die, Camilla said quietly. It just changes form. William turned to her, his composure stripped bare. How do you keep breathing? He asked softly, when the air no longer feels like it belongs to you. Camilla paused. You remember that the air is filled with them, she said. Every breath carries the love that never left. Outside, preparations had already begun. The chief press secretary met with royal aides, shaping the announcement with care and restraint. They rehearsed the phrasing, dignified and calm. But elsewhere in the palace, hearts were breaking. King Charles waited. He had aged years in hours. The steady voice of monarchy now cracked with grief. When William entered his father's study, they said nothing. Charles rose and embraced his son. No protocol, no speeches. William's shoulders shook. The crown broke in his father's arms. Take time, Charles whispered. The nation will wait. William shook his head. She wouldn't want delay. She'd want me to keep going for the children. The king nodded, understanding clear in his eyes. Then let the nation grieve with you, he said softly. You do not need to carry this alone. By evening, the first vigil began. The sun had barely set, casting long, amber shadows across the city's streets. When candles flickered to life outside Buckingham Palace, thousands gathered in silence, holding flowers, photographs, and letters, their faces reflecting the soft glow of flame. No royal directive had called them there. They simply came, drawn by love, by shock, by the instinct to mourn the woman who had felt more like family than royalty, whose presence had threaded quietly through their lives, comforting and grounding in ways few could articulate. Television crews arrived, but their voices were hushed. Their usual urgency dissolved into reverent observation. Reporters abandoned their scripted coverage, speaking only in whispers softened by sincerity. The nation waits, one anchor said quietly, for confirmation of what many already feared, each word carefully weighed, carrying the unbearable weight of unspoken grief. Back inside the palace, William sat with his children. The nursery felt painfully unchanged. The same books, the same toys, the faint lingering scent of Catherine's perfume remained on the pillows, a ghost of presence that haunted and soothed simultaneously. She had kissed them goodnight. George sat closest to him, his small hand resting on his father's knee. Charlotte's eyes wide and uncertain, darting between her brothers, searching for reassurance. Louis leaned against William's arm, too young to grasp the permanence of loss, yet sensing the charged stillness in the air. William swallowed hard before speaking, his voice trembling despite the effort to remain calm. "Mummy loved you more than words can say," he whispered, forcing his voice to remain steady, though each syllable cracked with pain. "And she told me something just for us." George looked up, his lip trembling. What did she say? Papa William hesitated, the memory of her voice both healing and unbearable. She said that when we see each other smile, we'll see her too, a fragile promise echoing with the depth of a lifetime. That every time they laughed, she would be near, even for a fleeting moment. None of them spoke immediately, letting the weight of her words settle. Then Charlotte climbed into his lap, whispering, "Can she see us now?" William's throat tightened, the answer catching in his chest. "Yes, my darling, she's watching us right now." Louis, barely understanding, pointed toward the window. "Is she in the stars?" William smiled through tears. "Yes, maybe she's the brightest one." Their innocence cut deeper than any headline ever could, slicing through centuries of royal history and protocol. This was simply a father holding his children, their fragile hearts intertwined, a family shattered, yet still breathing in the safety of each other's presence. In the hallway outside, Carol and Michael Middleton stood quietly, arms wrapped around one another, clinging to the shared warmth of family amidst sorrow. They had been dignified through every chapter of Catherine's royal life, but now they were simply parents grieving their daughter. Palace staff, hardened by decades of duty, averted their eyes, many fighting tears of their own, their composure brittle against the tide of quiet heartbreak. That night, Windsor slept uneasily. The palace, so often alive with preparation for ceremony and state, now felt like a mausoleum, the walls heavy with silence and memory, every echo reverberating loss. The portraits of past monarchs watched in painted silence, as though even they could sense the shift in absence of light where it had once dwelled. Near midnight, William returned to the chapel. He lit a single candle at the altar where he had sat that morning. The flame flickered weakly at first, then steadied, reflecting in his tear-streaked eyes. The fragile reflection of grief mirrored back in the polished stone. He knelt, hands clasped loosely. His voice, a whisper, broke the silence. "Thank you," he said, not elaborating, for no words could encompass what filled his heart. There was no need. The words carried everything: gratitude, grief, love, faith, and the fragile acceptance that the woman who had defined his world had left him a mission far greater than himself, a mission to honor her life through every future step. In the distance, the wind swept through the gardens, rustling the magnolia trees. She loved. It was a sound almost imperceptible, yet William heard it as though the world itself sighed alongside him. By dawn, the press office released the carefully crafted statement. 37 words, chosen with meticulous care, were sent across the globe. The Princess of Wales passed peacefully, surrounded by her family. Her kindness, courage, and grace will be remembered by the world, and every word carried the quiet devastation of a nation in mourning. She so deeply touched, the news spread with quiet devastation. Bells tolled across cities and villages, flags lowered to half-mast, and as the sun rose once more over Windsor, the palace remained, still its heart forever changed, the nation mourning, a hush of sorrow lingering like morning mist. The news broke just after sunrise, cascading across television screens, phones, and radios. The announcement echoed like a distant bell. The Princess of Wales has passed peacefully, surrounded by her family. For a brief moment, Britain stood still. Commuters froze mid-step. Shopkeepers paused before opening their doors. The hum of a waking nation softened into collective disbelief. In London, the first to arrive at Kensington Palace were not reporters, but citizens. Mothers with prams, veterans in medals, schoolchildren clutching hand-picked flowers, each drawn by devotion, grief, and admiration. They gathered at the black iron gates, the same gates that had once overflowed with tributes decades earlier for another princess lost too soon. Bouquets began to pile against the railings, lilies, roses, and wildflowers from local gardens, each carrying a handwritten note. "She was our hope," one card read. Another said simply, "Thank you, Catherine, for teaching us grace." By midday, the crowd had grown into thousands. Television cameras rolled, yet the reporters spoke softly, as if afraid to break the reverence. Even the British press seemed humbled by the gravity of the moment, moved by the sheer sincerity of public devotion. At Westminster Abbey, the great bells tolled their solemn rhythm, cutting through the crisp autumn air. Flags across the Commonwealth were lowered to half-mast. In Edinburgh, Sydney, Ottawa, and Wellington, public vigils formed spontaneously. Candles flickered in churchyards, and strangers held hands in silence. In London, St. James's Park, a choir of children sang quietly beneath the weeping willows. Their voices trembled with innocence, rising through the chill morning air in tribute to the woman who had knelt beside so many children in hospitals and schools, who had made kindness seem like duty. Within Windsor Castle, the royal household moved through rehearsed precision, yet this was no ceremony. Courtiers wore black armbands. Their composure was brittle. The royal kitchen halted its usual bustle. Even the guards at the gates carried themselves with a softer stillness, aware that the nation's gaze was not upon pomp, but upon grief itself. Prince William did not appear in public that day. He remained with his children, protecting what little privacy remained in this moment of raw loss. In their private quarters, a gentle rain streaked the window panes. George stood beside him, watching raindrops race down the glass. "It's like the sky is crying, Papa," he whispered. William placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Yes," he said quietly, "maybe heaven misses her too." That afternoon, King Charles addressed the nation from Buckingham Palace. The speech was brief, measured, heartfelt, and uncharacteristically personal. His voice trembled only once when he said her name. She brought warmth to every corner of our family and every heart. She touched across this nation. He said, "Her example of service and grace will remain a guiding light for us." All around Britain, people wept in small villages. Church bells joined the chorus of mourning. Historians drew parallels to Princess Diana's passing, though they spoke carefully. Catherine's story was her own, a modern queen in spirit, a woman who carried centuries of tradition with unstudied humanity. At Westminster, the Archbishop of Canterbury held a brief reflection. She showed us that compassion need not bow to power, that kindness is a form of courage, he said, his voice echoing through the vast cathedral. In hospitals, she had visited nurses. At primary schools across England, teachers spoke to students about her charity work. Children drew pictures of her smiling face and left them on classroom windows. In a quiet corner of Berkshire, Carol and Michael Middleton sat together, their faces etched with heartbreak. For them, this was not a royal tragedy, but the loss of a daughter who had once baked cakes in their kitchen and laughed at the smallest things. She was never trying to be perfect, Carol whispered to a friend. She was just trying to be kind. That evening, the rain stopped. The clouds parted to reveal a stretch of pale blue sky over London. At exactly 8 o'clock, the palace organised a moment of national reflection. Across the United Kingdom, lights dimmed. Big Ben stood silent. Cities fell still. Millions held candles at their windows. In Windsor, William stood on the terrace with his children. The flicker of candlelight reflected in the palace windows below, a sea of gold stretching into the distance. Charlotte leaned against his arm and whispered, "Mummy would like all the lights." He smiled faintly, his eyes glistening. "Yes, my love," he said. She would. The following morning, newspapers across the world printed the same image, Catherine's portrait, framed in soft light beneath the headline, "The People's Princess Reborn." Commentators spoke of her humility, her compassion, her refusal to be distant from those she served. She had redefined what it meant to be royal, not through spectacle, but through presence in Parliament. The Prime Minister's voice broke as she addressed the chamber. Her Royal Highness taught us that true leadership lies in empathy. She will remain not just in history, but in our hearts. Even those who had never met her felt her absence like the loss of a family member. Strangers left flowers for someone they had only seen on screens, but somehow felt they knew. The nation's grief transcended protocol. Back at Windsor, preparations for the funeral began quietly. Plans that had been written years earlier under the code name Operation Lily were now being set in motion. The palace would ensure dignity, but William made one request. No excessive grandeur. He wanted her farewell to reflect who she had been, elegant, humble, radiant in simplicity. As the days passed, the royal family gathered strength and unity. The Queen Consort oversaw the ceremonial details. The King met daily with advisers, but all eyes turned toward William, who would soon have to face the nation. Behind closed doors, he practiced his speech for the memorial. He stood in an empty room, reading aloud to the air. "She was my compass," he said softly. "She showed me how to lead without hardness, how to serve without pride." His voice faltered as he reached the words she told me to keep smiling. He lowered the paper and looked out the window toward the courtyard below. The scent of rain lingered, mingled with the faint perfume of the flowers flooding the gates. Somewhere beyond, the crowd continued to grow, their candles reflecting in the puddles along the road. The sound of quiet sobs drifted upward through the still air. And in that moment, standing at the window of Windsor, Prince William understood what she had meant by her final whisper. Heaven has its own way of staying near. The legacy she left behind stretched weeks past, though time seemed to move differently now, quieter, heavier, as if the world itself had paused to adjust to her absence. The palace resumed its routines, but the rhythm was slower, softer. Courtiers spoke gently. Footsteps echoed longer in the halls. Even the gardens, so often alive with laughter and music, seemed to mourn her. Still, amid the stillness, something beautiful began to emerge. The world did not forget Catherine. It remembered her with a tenderness rarely granted to those of power. Her face graced murals. Her words appeared in classrooms. Her work, especially with children and mental health, continued to bloom. Through those she had inspired, her kindness had become a living thing, passed from hand to hand, quietly refusing to fade. Prince William felt that most of all. Each morning, he woke to the muffled sound of life continuing outside his window, staff greeting one another, horses in the courtyard, the first carriage departing for official duties. It was strange how the world could keep moving while one's heart remained still. But then he would hear laughter, light, unguarded, laughter from down the corridor, and he would know the children were awake. And in that laughter, he heard her. He began taking them for walks again, just as she had loved to do. Through Windsor's gardens, beneath the magnolias, and along the narrow paths by the water, George walked ahead, hands in his pockets, trying to appear grown. Charlotte gathered wildflowers for the table. Lou darted from one tree to the next, chasing his shadow. William followed quietly, his grief tempered by gratitude in public. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable. His posture remained regal, but his eyes carried a new depth. There was a warmth there, a softness that had not been seen before. He no longer spoke from duty alone. He spoke from the heart. At appearances, he lingered longer with children, clasped hands more firmly, looked people in the eye. The world could see it. Love had changed him. When the time came for the memorial service, Windsor was blanketed in pale mist. Once more, St. George's Chapel stood solemn, golden in the morning light, its bells tolling with gentle reverence. Foreign dignitaries, world leaders, and thousands of citizens filled the grounds. Yet despite the grandeur, the atmosphere was intimate, more like a gathering of family than a state ceremony. Inside, the choir began to sing her favourite hymn, their voices rising toward the vaulted ceiling, each note carrying the ache of remembrance and the quiet faith of love enduring beyond sight. The children sat in the front row, holding hands. Their faces were pale, their composure far beyond their years. Beside them, William sat still, his expression steady, but his eyes rimmed with exhaustion. When his turn came to speak, he rose slowly and approached the lectern. The cathedral fell into perfect silence. Cameras from around the world focused on him, yet he seemed unaware of them. He spoke not as a prince, but as a husband, a father, and a man still learning how to live without the other half of his heart. "She was my compass," he began, his voice measured, calm. "She showed me that strength and gentleness are not opposites, but partners. She taught me how to serve, not by position, but by compassion." He paused, taking a slow breath. Catherine believed that kindness could rebuild the world one act at a time, and she was right. I see it now, in our children, in the people she touched, in the countless lives changed by her quiet devotion. He looked down briefly, his composure wavering. "She told me before she left us that when I see our children smile, I will see her, and I do." Every day, a faint tremor ran through his voice. "So I ask you," he continued, "not to mourn her absence, but to carry her example forward, live her kindness, share her gentleness, let her light guide you as it guides us." When he stepped back, the crowd rose in silent unity. The sound of gentle weeping filled the air, mingled with the rustle of programs and the soft creak of pews. Outside, the bells rang once more, their echo carrying across the fields and into the hearts of millions watching around the world. In the days that followed, the royal family returned to quiet life, yet everything felt transformed. William spent his evenings reading bedtime stories in the same voice that had once made Catherine laugh. He began to visit her favourite charities often, without cameras, continuing her work, not from obligation, but from love. Each visit was a conversation with her spirit, each act of service a way of keeping her close. He commissioned a small statue in the palace garden, not of grandeur or triumph, but of grace. It showed Catherine seated on a stone bench, smiling gently, her hands open as if welcoming the world around her. 3 children stood, each holding a flower beneath the statue, and an inscription read, "Where kindness reigns, love never dies." The world came to see it. Visitors left notes at its base, not of mourning, but of gratitude. Letters from mothers, teachers, nurses, and strangers who had never met her yet felt they had known her all along. At night, when the crowds dispersed and the palace lights dimmed, William often walked alone through the gardens. The magnolias glowed faintly in the moonlight, their petals trembling in the wind. He would stop before the statue, his hands clasped loosely, and whisper the same words he had spoken in that hospital room. Heaven has its own way of staying near. In that moment, he felt her presence. Not as a ghost or memory, but as peace. History would remember Catherine as the Princess of Wales, the wife of a future king. But to William, she remained something far greater. His home, his anchor, his reason. Through her, the monarchy itself rediscovered its heart. Because in the end, her greatest legacy was not charity or ceremony. It was love, quiet, steadfast, royal. In its humility, love that reminded the world that even behind crowns and corridors of power beats a human heart capable of breaking, capable of healing, and capable of hope. Catherine's story reminds us that grace is not found in grandeur, but in compassion. If her journey moved you, honour her legacy by showing kindness to someone today. Subscribe for more royal stories where behind every crown lies a heartbeat, and behind every headline, a human soul.
Thank you so much for talking to us. This is a slightly peculiar, unusual way of doing an interview. We are living in very unusual times at the moment.
After long years of silence, everything inside the royal family exploded into a storm of revelations. During Harry's highly anticipated homecoming, King Charles finally revealed a truth that had been buried for decades. He and Prince William confirmed what no one expected. The real identities of Archie and Lilette were not what the world had always believed. The room went still, shock etched on every face. In that moment, decades of hidden secrets, forbidden relationships, and a story that began long before Harry even met Meghan were exposed. Nothing would ever be the same again. What really happened behind closed doors? Why had the truth been kept hidden for so long? Tonight, we uncover every shocking detail. On the night of Harry's return, the palace gates opened slowly, and he stepped out of the car with his family beside him. It had been years since he walked these grounds hoping for warmth, and tonight he dared to hope again. Meghan held Lilibet's hand tightly while Archie walked close to his father, eyes wide at the massive stone palace looming ahead. Harry took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He wanted this to work. He wanted home to feel like home again. King Charles had personally invited them. Weeks earlier, a letter arrived, meticulously written in his father's careful, familiar handwriting. It spoke of family, healing, and the desire to have his grandchildren near. Harry had read it countless times, searching for hidden meanings, but all he saw was a father who seemed tired yet genuine. Inside, the palace glowed softly under warm lighting. Staff moved quietly through the halls, preparing the gathering room where the family would meet. This was no public event, no cameras, no press, no grand speeches, just family. That was what Charles promised. William and Kate arrived first. William's face was a mask of control, every expression measured. Kate offered Harry a polite smile, but it barely reached her eyes. Harry noticed, but said nothing. He had grown used to the distance that had always existed between them. Princess Anne entered next, steady and commanding as always. She nodded to Harry and spoke briefly to Meghan about the children. Camilla came last, moving with quiet grace to stand beside Charles. Her gaze lingered on Harry with an emotion he couldn't name: pity, sorrow, or perhaps both. Harry felt the heavy tension in the room, the strange way people glanced at one another without ever meeting his eyes. Charles stood at the centre, hands clasped, his face lined with more than age. Something urgent, something wrong. Meghan felt it too. She reached for Harry's hand, and he held it tightly, aware that something monumental was about to happen. Archie and Lilibet played near the window, oblivious to the storm brewing around them. Then, Charles cleared his throat. The room fell into an uneasy silence. Even the children froze, sensing the shift. He thanked everyone for coming, his voice calm but heavy with gravity. There was something he had carried far too long. Harry's heart raced. He scanned the room. William's face betrayed nothing. Anne stared at the floor. Camilla avoided his gaze completely. Charles spoke of his health, of what the doctors had warned about the time he had left. He refused to leave this world carrying secrets that should have been revealed. Meghan's grip tightened, and Harry felt the weight in his chest intensify. Charles admitted to his many failures as a father, his eyes finally locking with Harry's. Tonight, he vowed, He would not make the mistake of silence. The air seemed to vanish. Harry tried to speak, but his voice failed him. Charles straightened, bracing himself as if to carry a crushing weight. He declared a truth that had to be spoken before time ran out. The words hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. Harry felt the ground shift beneath him. He did not yet know what would be said, but he understood with terrifying certainty that nothing would ever be the same. What truth could be so dangerous that a king would risk everything to reveal it? Charles did not pause. He did not soften his words. He simply spoke as if cutting open a wound that had festered for decades. Recent DNA tests had proven that Archie and Lilette were not biologically Harry's. The results were undeniable. The room went deathly silent. Harry felt the blow hit him physically. His mouth opened, but no words came. Meghan went pale, her hand slipping from his grasp. Charles's voice continued, steady yet laden with sorrow. The children's DNA matched a man from Meghan's past, her first husband. Meghan gasped, flying a hand to her mouth. Tears welled immediately, but she could not speak. Harry searched her face for denial, for shock, for any hint that this was untrue, but all he saw was raw guilt. Charles pressed further. Meghan had never completely ended her relationship with her first husband. Even during the early stages of dating Harry, the connection had continued. Harry staggered as if struck, his mind racing to reconstruct conversations, moments, signs he had missed. William stood across the room, his face carved from stone. He had known. He had known for months and said nothing. Harry's voice cracked as he confronted his brother. William replied quietly. He had wanted to tell him, but their father had asked him to wait. Harry laughed bitterly, humorless. Wait for what? For this moment? For public humiliation? Charles raised a hand. He explained that history demanded clarity. The crown had to know the truth. The line of succession needed protection. Harry shouted back that these were children, 3 and 5 years old. Charles answered bluntly. They were not his. The words fell like stones into deep water. Meghan sobbed, body shaking. Archie and Lily stopped playing, staring wide-eyed at the adults. Charles announced the children's titles would be re-evaluated. They could not hold positions they were never entitled to. Harry felt his world shatter. He looked at his father, the man who had just destroyed everything he believed in, and asked why this could not have been done privately. Charles replied that he had spared Harry nothing his entire life. He would not begin now by letting lies stand as truth. Harry turned to Meghan. She reached for him, but he stepped back. He asked if it was true. She nodded, tears streaming, admitting she had tried to tell him many times. Harry said flatly, she had not. The betrayal was complete, not just from Meghan, but from his father who chose this method to reveal the truth, and from William, who had kept the secret from everyone. He looked around the room. Some family members looked away. Some watched him with pity. None moved to comfort him. He knelt beside Archie and Lily, innocent in all this, blameless in a web of secrets. He kissed their heads and stood, announcing he was leaving. Meghan began to speak, but he cut her off. His voice was cold. Final. Do not say another word. He walked toward the door, legs unsteady, heart shattered into pieces too small to ever be restored. Could a family this broken ever find its way back? The secret's origin lay years before Harry entered Meghan's life. In a small Los Angeles film production office, reviewing contracts for a minor role, Meghan first saw him. The room was crowded with crew and assistants rushing to finalize paperwork before shooting began. That was when she first noticed him. Trevor, a low-budget film producer trying to make it in Hollywood, had kind eyes and an easy smile that made her feel truly seen in a city where most people passed right by her. They started talking during a lunch break, and the conversation flowed so naturally that neither of them wanted it to end. He made her laugh in ways she hadn't felt before. She made him feel like his dreams weren't foolish, like someone finally understood him in a world that often felt dismissive. Within weeks, they were inseparable. Their relationship moved quickly, fueled by youth, ambition, and that intoxicating rush of discovering someone who truly got them on a deeper level. Trevor supported her auditions, drove her to casting after casting, and believed in her talent when she barely did. Meghan fell hard. He became her cheerleader, her partner, her anchor, her safe place in a world that was often uncertain and harsh. They married young, perhaps too young, in a beautiful ceremony in Jamaica, surrounded by close friends and family who had watched their love bloom like wildfire under the Caribbean sun. The early days of their marriage were filled with laughter, late-night conversations about the future, and dreams of building something extraordinary together. Trevor wanted to produce films that made a difference. Megan wanted to act in roles that changed the way people saw the world. They pushed each other forward, always believing that together they could conquer anything life threw at them. But Hollywood is notoriously unkind to dreamers without connections. Trevor worked long hours on projects that barely paid. Megan auditioned endlessly, only to face rejection after rejection. Bills piled up. Pressure mounted. They began to argue, first about money, then priorities, then who was sacrificing more for their dreams. Then Megan landed a television role that required her to move to Toronto for months at a time. Trevor stayed behind in Los Angeles, trying to keep his small production company afloat. The distance slowly became a wall between them. Phone calls grew shorter. Visits became rare. They were living separate lives in separate cities, bound together only by a marriage certificate and fading memories of the people they once were. The fights became harsher. Megan accused him of not understanding the demands of her career. Trevor accused her of choosing fame over their marriage. Both were right. Both were wrong. Love was still there, buried beneath layers of resentment and exhaustion, but neither knew how to reach it anymore. Their official separation came quietly. No dramatic scenes, no public announcements, just two people admitting that they had grown apart. Divorce papers were signed, friends were told life moved on, but something inside both of them refused to let go completely. The emotional attachment lingered, like a ghost hovering just out of sight. Neither could shake it. They told themselves it was over. They told everyone else it was over, yet neither of them truly believed it. What happens when two people divorce, but their hearts never fully separate? The unfinished love story continued quietly, hidden and unresolved. After the divorce, Megan threw herself into work. She took on more scenes, more interviews, more appearances. She kept herself busy because being still meant thinking about what she had lost, and she wasn't ready for that yet. But late at night, when the noise of the day faded, she found herself reaching for her phone. Trevor did the same. They started with simple texts, asking how the other was doing. Then the messages became longer. Then came phone calls. Then occasional meetings for coffee. When Megan returned to Los Angeles, they tried to stay away from each other entirely. They truly did. Trevor dated other women, trying to convince himself that he could move on. Megan went on dates with actors and businessmen who looked good on paper, but felt empty in reality. Yet every breakup, every disappointment, every lonely night pulled them back toward each other. Friends noticed the pattern and asked Megan why she kept returning to someone she had divorced. She had no good answer. She would say they were just friends, supporting each other through difficult times, but the truth was far more complicated. The bond between them had not broken. It had only changed shape. There were moments when romance returned unexpectedly. A dinner that lasted too long, a conversation that turned too intimate, a night when old feelings resurfaced, and neither had the strength to resist. They would wake up filled with regret and confusion, promising themselves it would never happen again, but it always did. Trevor understood her in ways no one else could. He had known her before fame, before cameras, before she perfected the polished version of herself the world would see. With him, she could be messy, uncertain, raw and real. That kind of comfort is rare, and she could not bring herself to give it up completely. Megan knew it was unhealthy. She knew they were holding each other back from moving forward. She tried multiple times to make a clean break, blocking his number, refusing to see him, focusing entirely on building her new life. But the pull was too strong. Within weeks, she would unblock him. Within a month, they would be talking again. Trevor felt the same magnetic pull. He told himself he needed closure. He told himself that staying in contact helped them both heal. Deep down, he knew he was lying to himself. He still loved her. He probably always would. Their connection was invisible to the outside world. They were careful, meeting in private, keeping communication hidden. No one suspected that the ex-husband Meghan rarely mentioned was still woven into the fabric of her daily life. When Meghan began gaining recognition, when her career began to take off in ways they had once only dreamed about, Trevor felt proud and heartbroken at the same time. She was achieving everything they had planned together, but he was watching from the sidelines, unable to touch the life they had imagined. She felt the same strange mix of emotions. Success tasted hollow without him to share it. She wanted to call him after every milestone, every victory, every moment of doubt, and often did. Friends assumed she would eventually move on. That time, distance, and new relationships would sever the tie between them. But what no one understood was that some connections run deeper than logic, time, or even love itself. Meghan did not know how to explain it, even to herself. She had moved on in every visible way. She had built a new life, new friendships, new dreams, yet emotionally a part of her remained tethered to the man she had married and divorced. Trevor held on just as tightly. He waited, hoping that one day she would realize they were meant to be together. He told himself that if he was patient enough, if he stayed present enough, she would come back to him for good. Neither realized that this unfinished love story would one day collide with a life far bigger and more complicated than anything they had imagined. But could anyone truly build a new future while still holding on to the past? A prince entered the picture. Meghan met Harry on a warm summer evening in Toronto. A mutual friend had arranged the introduction, casually mentioning there was someone she simply had to meet. Meghan arrived at the restaurant, curious but not expecting anything life-changing. Then Harry walked in. He was not what she expected. No formality, no distance, no coldness. Just a man with kind eyes and an easy laugh who seemed genuinely interested in her. They talked for hours, the conversation flowing as naturally as breathing. He asked about her work, her passions, her dreams. She found herself opening up in ways she rarely did with strangers. Harry felt something shift inside him. This woman was different. She was smart, independent, unafraid to challenge him. She did not treat him like a prince. She treated him like a person, a rarity in his world. It made him want to know everything about her. Their romance moved quickly. Harry flew to see her whenever possible. Meghan rearranged her schedule to spend weekends with him in London. They texted constantly, called late into the night, shared secrets, fears, and hopes. Within months, Harry knew he wanted to marry her. Meghan tried to fully close the door on her past. She told Trevor she was seeing someone serious, that they needed to stop their back and forth once and for all. Trevor agreed, though his heart broke as he said it. For a few weeks, they maintained complete silence, but old habits are hard to break. When Meghan felt overwhelmed by the intensity of dating a prince, she reached out. Just a text, just a call. Nothing that felt dangerous. Trevor responded every time. He told himself he was being a good friend. He told himself he was helping her through a difficult transition. But part of him hoped this new relationship would not last, that she would realize she belonged with him. Harry fell deeply and completely in love. He saw a future with Meghan that felt real and possible. He proposed within a year, offering her a ring that held stones from his mother's collection. Meghan said yes, tears streaming down her face. She meant it. She truly wanted this life with him. But the royal family was watching carefully. Charles noticed inconsistencies in the timeline. Meghan presented details about her past, but some things didn't add up. William observed unexplained trips she took without clear explanation. Palace staff reported phone calls Meghan took in private, her voice low, speaking in hushed tones, her body language tense and guarded. Kate mentioned to William that something felt off, though she couldn't pinpoint exactly what. William agreed but chose not to press the issue, wanting to preserve his brother's happiness and avoid unnecessary conflict. Harry was happier than he had been in years, glowing with love. They did not want to ruin that. Harry was too in love to notice any warning signs. When Meghan seemed distracted or distant, he assumed it was the pressure of joining the royal family. When she needed space, he gave it without question. When she kept parts of her life private, he respected her boundaries completely, trusting fully in the woman he adored. Trust came easily to him, especially with someone he loved so deeply. Meghan convinced herself that her occasional contact with Trevor was harmless, They weren't doing anything wrong. They were simply two people who had once been married and still cared about each other. She could manage both relationships, she told herself repeatedly. She could keep them separate. No one needed to know, but secrets have a way of growing in the dark. What starts as a small lie can expand into a much larger deception. What feels harmless in the moment can turn devastating. Megan did not realize she was building a life on a foundation that could not hold. She did not see that the threads connecting her past and present were pulling tighter, knotting themselves into a rope that would eventually strangle everything she was trying to build. Harry planned their wedding with joy and hope, believing he had found a partner who would stand beside him for life. He had no idea the woman he loved was still emotionally entangled with someone else. Can a marriage survive when one person's heart is divided between two worlds, a royal wedding and a hidden storm brewing in secret? The wedding was everything the world wanted it to be. Millions watched as Meghan walked down the aisle of St. George's Chapel, her dress flowing behind her like a river of silk. Harry stood waiting, eyes brimming with love, certainty, and a pride he hadn't felt in years. They exchanged vows in front of royalty, celebrities, and commoners alike. The world celebrated the headlines, declared it a fairy tale, but behind the palace walls, concern quietly grew. Charles had received private reports from security teams who monitored communications for safety reasons. There were patterns that troubled him deeply. Phone records revealed regular contact with a number traced back to Los Angeles. Text messages were encrypted, hinting that someone wanted privacy. Meghan took calls late at night, always stepping away from Harry before answering. William learned about it first. Charles called him into his office one afternoon and laid out the information. William felt his stomach tighten, a knot of dread forming in his chest. He asked if they were certain. Charles said the evidence was clear, but not conclusive. They could not prove anything inappropriate. They could only observe, document, and wonder. William suggested confronting Meghan directly, but Charles refused. Harry was finally happy after years of pain and loss. They would not destroy that happiness based on suspicion alone. They would watch, wait, and hope they were wrong. The decision weighed heavily on both of them. Every family dinner, every public appearance, every moment spent with Harry and Meghan felt like a lie, carefully wrapped in smiles. But they stayed silent, choosing Harry's joy over confronting an uncomfortable truth. Meghan struggled during the early months of marriage. The royal protocols felt suffocating. Media attention was relentless. Family dynamics were far more complicated than she had anticipated. She felt isolated, misunderstood, trapped in a role she was not sure she wanted anymore. During these difficult months, Trevor became her lifeline once again. She called him when Harry was away on royal duties. She texted him when she needed someone to remind her of who she was before all of this. He listened, offered comfort, made her feel seen in ways the royal family never could. Trevor still loved her deeply. He heard the strain in her voice and hoped it meant she was realizing her mistake. He offered to visit London. Meghan said no at first, knowing how dangerous that would be, but the loneliness became unbearable, and eventually she agreed to meet him during a trip she claimed was for charity work. They met in a quiet hotel, far from photographers and royal watchers. The conversation was emotional, intense, and charged with unspoken longing. Trevor told her she could still leave, that it was not too late to choose a different life. Meghan cried in his arms, torn between the commitment she had made and the connection she could not sever. Nothing physical happened that day, but the emotional intimacy crossed every boundary meant to protect her marriage. She left feeling guilty and confused, knowing she had betrayed Harry, even if she could rationalize it as just talking to an old friend. Then Meghan became pregnant with Archie. The news brought joy to the family. Harry was overjoyed, imagining the life they would build as parents. The palace announced it publicly, and the world celebrated. But Meghan felt panic rising inside. She had not been faithful in her heart, even if she had been faithful in body. She had let Trevor remain present when she should have cut him out completely, and now she was bringing a child into a marriage built on secrets. Trevor reappeared during her pregnancy, reaching out to congratulate her. The conversation started innocently, but quickly became deeper. Meghan confided her fears about motherhood, about whether she was strong enough for this life. Trevor offered emotional support that felt too intimate for someone meant to be her past. Boundaries blurred further as late-night calls grew longer. Messages became more frequent. Megan told herself she was not doing anything wrong, but she knew in her heart she was betraying the man who loved her. She did not know that the palace was still watching. She did not know that every call, every message, every secret meeting was being documented by people whose duty was to protect the crown. She did not realize the storm that was building and that soon it would sweep away everything she had worked so hard to create. But how long can secrets stay hidden before they destroy everything? Archie and Lilette held the secret. Nobody suspected. Archie arrived on a bright May morning, and the world rejoiced at the birth of a new royal baby. Harry stood outside the hospital, beaming with pride, cradling his son in his arms. Meghan looked exhausted but happy. The photographs were perfect, headlines glowing. Everything appeared exactly as it should, but Charles noticed something the moment he first held his grandson. The shape of the eyes, the set of the mouth, the way the baby's features seemed to belong to someone else entirely. He told himself he was imagining things that newborns often look different from their parents. At first, yet the feeling lingered. William visited the hospital and felt the same quiet unease. He studied Archie's face, searching for traces of Harry or even Diana. He found none. The baby was beautiful, but he did not resemble the family. William kept his thoughts to himself, not wanting to ruin a moment that should have been pure joy. As Archie grew, the differences became harder to ignore. His colouring, his build, the way he moved, none of it resembled Harry. Charles watched carefully during family gatherings, comparing the child to photographs of Harry at the same age. The contrast was striking. Harry noticed nothing. He was completely absorbed in fatherhood, delighting in every smile, every sound, every small milestone. Archie was his son. That was all that mattered to him. Meghan became increasingly protective as the months passed. She declined certain family traditions that required medical documentation. She avoided christening ceremonies that followed royal protocol. She kept the children away from extended family whenever possible. When questioned, she cited privacy concerns and the need to protect her children from media attention. The excuses were reasonable on the surface, but Charles and William saw a troubling pattern. Meghan was controlling access, limiting exposure, preventing situations where questions might arise naturally. When Lilette was born 2 years later, the concerns intensified. The baby girl was beautiful with delicate features and bright eyes, but once again she bore no resemblance to Harry or anyone in the royal family. The physical contrast was even more obvious this time. Charles held his granddaughter, heartbreak swelling in his chest. He desperately wanted to be wrong, to believe genetics could be unpredictable, but he had seen enough royal births to know what family resemblance looked like. This was not it. William spoke to Kate in private, sharing his fears. She had noticed the same things but had been reluctant to voice them. They agreed something was deeply wrong, but felt powerless to act. How could they accuse Meghan of something so terrible without proof? How could they shatter Harry's world? Based on physical appearance alone, the royal family quietly began gathering information. Medical reports from Archie's birth were reviewed. Timelines were examined. Questions were discreetly asked about Meghan's whereabouts. During key periods, palace staff were interviewed about visitors and phone calls. Security records revealed the continued communication with Trevor. The calls had never stopped, even after the children were born. The encrypted messages continued. There were unexplained absences that Meghan attributed to charity work or personal time. Charles assembled a private file of inconsistencies, including the timing of the pregnancies and her trips, noting every detail meticulously. Meghan had taken alone periods when she and Harry were apart for work obligations. The evidence was circumstantial, but mounting. He showed it to William during a private meeting in his office. William read through everything in silence, his face growing darker with each page. When he finished, he looked at his father with exhausted, almost hollow eyes and asked what they should do. Charles had no easy answer. They could not ignore what they were seeing, but confronting it meant destroying Harry's life and potentially tearing the family apart forever. Anne was brought into the conversation next. She reviewed the evidence with her characteristic directness and declared that they needed certainty before making any accusations. Speculation would help no one. Camilla agreed. If they were going to move forward, They needed proof that could not be disputed or denied. The decision was made quietly, without drama, in a sitting room where kings and queens had made difficult choices for centuries. They would seek the truth, whatever the cost. But what happens when the truth you seek is the truth you fear most? The DNA test that changed everything loomed ahead. The opportunity came during a routine medical examination. Archie had developed a minor ear infection that required a doctor's visit. Standard procedures included taking samples for analysis, and Charles seized the moment. He requested that additional tests be run discreetly, with results sent directly to him through private channels. The doctor understood the gravity of the request. He asked no questions and promised complete confidentiality. The samples were processed at a specialised laboratory used exclusively by the royal family for sensitive matters. William supported the decision, though it made him sick to his stomach. He told Charles that truth was better than living with doubt, better than allowing the family to crumble slowly under the weight of suspicion. If the test came back positive, they could put their fears to rest. If it came back negative, they would finally know what they were dealing with. The wait for results felt endless. Charles barely slept. William threw himself into royal duties to avoid thinking about what they might discover. Both men moved through their days, carrying a secret that felt heavier with each passing hour. The first results arrived in a sealed envelope, delivered by hand. Charles opened it alone in his study. His hands shaking, the words on the page were clinical and clear. Archie was not biologically related to Harry. Charles sat down heavily, the paper slipping from his hands. He had hoped to be wrong, had prayed his suspicions were unfounded, but the science did not lie. He ordered a second test, using different samples processed at a different laboratory. He needed to be absolutely certain before moving forward. The second results arrived 3 weeks later and confirmed the first. There was no mistake. William was with him when he opened the second envelope. Neither man spoke for a long time. They simply sat in silence, processing the magnitude of what this meant. Charles decided he needed to confront Meghan before telling Harry. She deserved the chance to explain, to provide context, to perhaps offer some truth that would make sense of the impossible. He arranged a private meeting at Clarence's house, telling Meghan only that he wanted to discuss family matters. She arrived looking nervous, as if she already sensed what was coming. Charles did not waste time with pleasantries. He laid out the evidence calmly and clearly. The DNA tests, the timeline inconsistencies, the continued communication with her ex-husband. He asked her directly if Archie and Lilibet were Harry's biological children. Meghan's face crumbled, tears spilling down her cheeks as she tried to speak, her words broken and desperate. She admitted that Trevor had been present in her life throughout her marriage. She confessed their connection had never truly ended and that she had not been strong enough to let him go. She explained that during particularly difficult periods of her marriage, when she and Harry had been fighting and she felt completely alone, Trevor had visited. She had turned to him for comfort in ways she should not have. And it happened more than once. She had convinced herself it did not matter because she still loved Harry. When she became pregnant with Archie, she had not been certain who the father was, but she had chosen to believe it was Harry because that was the life she wanted, the future she had committed to. She told herself that belief could make it true. With Lilibet, there had been less doubt, but by then she was trapped in a web of lies too complex to escape. She could not admit the truth without destroying everything. Charles listened without interruption, his face a mask of controlled fury and deep sadness. When she finished, he asked if Harry knew any of this. Meghan shook her head, sobbing openly. Now Charles told her that Harry would have to be told. She begged him to let her do it privately to spare Harry the humiliation of a public revelation. Charles said it was too late for that. The truth involved the line of succession, the integrity of the crown, the historical record. This was bigger than her marriage or her shame. The royal family convened to discuss how to proceed. William argued for telling Harry immediately in private. Anne insisted the revelation needed witnesses to prevent future disputes. Camilla worried about Harry's mental state and whether he could handle such devastating news alone. Charles made the final decision. The truth would be revealed at a family gathering where Harry would have the support he needed, where witnesses could confirm what was said, and where the historical record would be clear and undeniable. He refused to let lies become the official truth. He refused to die, knowing future generations would believe a falsehood. Whatever the cost to Harry, to Meghan, or to the family's public image, the truth had to be spoken. Could any family survive? A betrayal this deep and devastating, falling out inside the palace walls, seemed almost too much to bear. The moment Charles finished speaking, the room erupted into chaos. Meghan stood frozen, her face drained of all colour, unable to form words. Palace staff quickly moved to her side, gently guiding her toward a private room away from the family. She did not resist. She could barely walk. Harry remained standing where he was, body rigid, eyes staring at nothing. He looked like a man struck by lightning, still trying to understand what had happened to him. Charles called for an immediate family meeting. Only senior royals were permitted to attend. William, Kate, Anne and Camilla gathered in the sitting room, while Harry was led to a separate space to process what he had just learned. They could not have this conversation with him present. Not yet. Charles wasted no time. He declared that the children's royal titles would be removed immediately until proper lineage could be established through legal channels. Archie and Lilibet could not hold positions or privileges reserved for direct descendants of the crown. The decision was final and non-negotiable. William agreed, though his voice was heavy with sadness. He understood the necessity but hated the cruelty of it. Those children were innocent. They had done nothing wrong. Yet the monarchy had rules that existed for reasons deeper than personal feelings. Anne spoke next, her tone practical and firm. Meghan needed to be kept away from all royal events going forward. The scandal would be enormous once the truth became public, and the family could not afford to be seen as condoning or protecting her. Distance was essential. Kate sat quietly, hands folded in her lap, eyes brimming with tears. She would not let them fall. She was thinking of Harry, of the devastation he must be feeling. The life he thought he had that had just been ripped away. When the meeting paused, she asked if she could go to him. Charles nodded. She found Harry in a small room overlooking the gardens, sitting in a chair, elbows on knees, head in hands. Kate sat beside him without speaking, simply placing a hand on his shoulder. He did not move, did not cry, just sat there, breathing slowly, trying to hold himself together. Kate told him softly that the family would support him through this, that he was not alone, and that whatever he needed, they would provide. Harry nodded but said nothing. What could he possibly say back in the main room? The discussion turned to protecting the monarchy's image. This revelation would shake public confidence and fuel endless speculation and criticism. The family needed a unified response, a clear message, and absolute control over the narrative. Camilla suggested releasing a carefully worded statement, acknowledging a private family matter without providing explicit details. She disagreed, arguing vagueness would invite more invasive questions. William proposed they say nothing publicly until legal matters were resolved. Charles listened to all of it and made the decision. They would remain silent for now. No statements, no explanations, no responses to press inquiries. The family would close ranks, handle matters internally, and only speak when absolutely necessary. He then addressed the question of Meghan. Strict restrictions would be placed immediately. She would not enter any royal residence without explicit permission, attend family gatherings, or be included in official photographs or events. For all practical purposes, she was no longer part of the royal family. William asked if that was legally enforceable. Charles said palace lawyers were drafting the necessary documents. Meghan would be informed of the restrictions within the hour. Anne asked about the children. Charles said Harry could decide whether to maintain a relationship despite biological truth. The family would not interfere, but they could not and would not be recognised as royals. The meeting lasted 2 hours. Everyone left feeling exhausted and hollowed out. This was not a victory, merely damage control in the wake of a disaster none of them wanted. Meghan was informed of the restrictions by palace officials, sitting in the private room, tears streaming, nodding mechanically as they explained next steps. She was not allowed to see Harry and could not leave until security protocols were in place. Harry demanded to see Meghan. Palace staff tried to delay the meeting, citing security protocols and family wishes, but he would not be stopped. He needed to hear the truth from her mouth, to look into her eyes and understand how this had happened. They met in a small private sitting room, guards stationed outside. Meghan's face was swollen from crying. Harry's expression was cold, distant, a look she had never seen. He asked one simple question. Was it true? Meghan nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. She tried to explain, to provide context, but her words came jumbled, desperate, and nothing she said could change the fundamental truth. She admitted she had never fully stopped seeing Trevor emotionally during difficult moments in their marriage. She had turned to him for comfort. Harry stood and walked to the window, back to her. He told her quietly that he had always sensed something was wrong, that there had been moments when her stories did not quite add up, when her emotions seemed directed at someone else, when she pulled away from him for reasons she could not explain. He had loved her too much to question it. He had trusted her completely. If you found this story gripping, shocking, and dramatic, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and comment below with your thoughts on this royal scandal.
I think it's very important that tradition stays, and tradition has a huge part of all this. But there's also points where you look at tradition and go, is that still fit for purpose today? Is that still the right thing to do?
Tradition still matters in royal life, but the real question now is whether every old custom still works in today's brutal spotlight. That debate sits right at the centre of this palace storm, because the move now being linked to Prince William is being framed as one of the hardest internal resets the monarchy has seen in years. On March 25th, 2026, William, acting with strengthened authority around the king, is said to have backed a firm decree cutting Queen Camilla's biological family, including Tom Parker Bowles, Laura Lopes, and their children, out of the inner ceremonial circle of Windsor and future top-level royal proceedings. This was not painted as a minor family disagreement. It was described as a hard, structural decision meant to separate Camilla's private family life from the public face of the crown once and for all. The main argument behind this reported move is all about the royal brand. For years, watchers have pointed to the growing visibility of the Parker Bowles family at major royal moments, from the 2023 coronation to the 2024 Sandringham Christmas walk, and many felt the line between private relatives and true royal figures was starting to blur in a dangerous way. In palace terms, that kind of confusion is no small thing. William's reported position is blunt and sharp. The Parker Bowles family hold no royal titles, carry no constitutional duty, and do not bear responsibility for protecting the monarchy in times of crisis. So, from his point of view, their repeated visibility in royal spaces creates a false impression that they hold some kind of official standing. He is said to believe the public has slowly started giving them unofficial status by association, and that kind of image drift can weaken the crown over time. That is why this alleged line in the sand sounds so ruthless. William's message in this version of events is that the Parker Bowles family are guests, not working members, and that distinction must now be enforced clearly and without confusion. In a slimmed-down monarchy, there is no room for royal-adjacent figures hanging around the edges while quietly soaking up prestige. That grey area, according to this account, is now over. Princess Anne is also being described as a major force behind this harder palace stance. Anne has always been seen as one of the strictest defenders of duty, protocol, and discipline, and insiders claim she has grown increasingly frustrated with what she sees as Camilla trying to ease her family into royal life through visibility, access, and repeated appearances. For Anne, the issue is not warmth or family affection. It is structure, clarity, and control. This situation is unusual for the House of Windsor because the monarch shares the throne with a consort who has children from a previous marriage. That alone created a new kind of problem the institution was never fully designed to handle. The concern, as this story tells it, is that non-royal influence may have slipped too close to the centre without the same standards, training, and restrictions expected of those who officially represent the monarchy. Anne is said to have helped William shape these exclusions into something closer to formal policy, so the Parker Bowles name is never mistaken for part of the Windsor line. The tension reportedly exploded when William directly challenged Camilla's judgment behind closed doors. He is said to have accused her of placing personal family ambition too close to the crown and of slowly normalizing her children and grandchildren within royal settings to raise their social standing under palace protection. That accusation hits hard because it suggests this was not accidental or harmless, but part of a steady drift toward recognition. William's alleged warning was simple but brutal. If a member of the Parker Bowles family were caught in scandal tomorrow or linked to some embarrassing headline, why should the House of Windsor take the hit in public opinion for people it does not control? That question reflects the whole fear behind this reported crackdown: guilt by association. In modern royal life, image damage can spread fast, and William is being portrayed here as someone determined to cut risk before it explodes. When Camilla reportedly pushed back and accused William of acting like a royal dictator, he is said to have stayed cold and unmoved. In this version, he made clear that while she may be queen consort, her children remain outsiders to the institution itself. Any effort to make their presence look official was, in his eyes, a push for public status, and he had no intention of allowing that to continue. To show the move was real, the reported changes went beyond words and straight into palace logistics. Camilla's children and grandchildren would no longer be transported in royal state limousines and would instead arrive like standard private guests using their own travel arrangements. That matters because royal optics are everything. Once the cars, entrances, and visual treatment change, the public message changes too. The same goes for positioning at events. According to this account, special guest zones would be used for the Parker Bowles family, keeping them away from senior working royals and out of photographs that might imply institutional importance. That is a sharp downgrade in symbolism, and symbolism is a huge deal in monarchy. In simple terms, the message would be loud and clear. These are private relatives, not public royal figures. The first signs of this split were reportedly seen back in December 2025, when William pushed for their absence from the Sandringham Christmas walk, especially after their more visible appearance the year before. That earlier move is now being framed as the test run for the much wider ban that followed. Once that door started closing, insiders say it was obvious the palace was moving toward a much stricter line. What makes this even more damaging for Camilla is the reported unity behind William. Catherine, Princess Anne, Edward, and Sophie are all said to support the tougher approach, believing the monarchy must be based on duty, restraint, and clear hierarchy, not blurred family access. In their eyes, this is not cruelty, but clean up. They reportedly see it as necessary protection for the future. That united front gives William's stance even more power. He is not being painted here as acting alone or out of emotion, but as the leader of a clear Windsor bloc preparing for the next era. The old setup allowed private relatives to hover near the institution like semi-official figures. The new reported model kills that grey zone completely. No shared spotlight, no royal transport, no close staging, no confusion. The second phase of this reported reform goes even further by focusing on scandal prevention. William and Anne are said to believe the biggest danger to a modern monarchy is being tied to people whose public behaviour, business interests, and social lives the palace cannot monitor. Unlike working royals, Camilla's family move in private circles, handle private ventures, and make private choices. That means the Crown could end up paying the price for situations it never approved. That is where the so-called zero-link policy comes in. Under this alleged approach, members of the Parker Bowles family would not be allowed to use royal locations as private social media backdrops or refer to their proximity to the king in commercial settings. Any attempt to trade on that connection would be treated seriously. The whole point is to stop borrowed royal glamour from becoming a quiet source of personal status or influence. Inside the palace, this reportedly hit Camilla hard. She is said to feel that William is not just protecting the crown, but steadily erasing her family's place from royal history. The loss of royal transport, the tighter event rules, and the visible distancing are all seen by her as deliberate humiliation. To her, it is a message that despite her crown, her own family will never be allowed near the centre of the Windsor future. King Charles, meanwhile, is being portrayed as caught in an ugly and painful middle ground. He has loyalty to his wife, but he also understands the hard logic behind William's argument. His health struggles have only made that balance harder to manage, and this story casts William as the enforcer Charles was often too soft to be, with Anne, Catherine, Edward and Sophie all forming a strong wall around the future king. Camilla's influence appears weaker than before. That is why this whole episode is being framed as more than a family clash. It is being treated as a major image reset before the next transfer of royal power. The message to the Parker Bowles family is that the days of moving close to the sovereign and sharing in palace prestige are over. William is shaping a monarchy that is leaner, tougher, and far stricter about who gets near the crown. As the media reacts to the fallout from these March 25th edicts, the bigger symbolism becomes impossible to ignore. This is not only about transport, guest zones, or event access. It is being framed as the closing of one chapter and the launch of another, with William's harder style replacing the softer, more blended family optics that marked the Charles era. Across Britain and the Commonwealth, this reported shift is being read as a major reassertion of royal authority, with the international press interpreting William's iron approach as a historic signal that the years of blended family experimentation under King Charles III are officially over. The public reaction in Britain did not land in just one direction at all. It came as a strange mix of shock, approval, and deep relief, especially from old-school royal watchers who felt a line had been crossed long ago. For a lot of traditionalists, seeing Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes at the 2023 coronation and then at later royal gatherings felt like the palace was letting private family drift way too close to state business. People had grown more respectful of Camilla because of her steady loyalty to Charles. Yes, but there was still a quiet discomfort over her non-royal children becoming too normal a sight around official royal life. That is why William's reported move to strip them of royal transport and push them into ordinary guest status has been described by some commentators as an optics masterstroke. By making them arrive like regular invitees instead of royal insiders, he is said to have restored the visual hierarchy that monarchy runs on. The symbolism matters because it tells the public that royal resources are for those carrying royal duty, not for relatives standing near the glow of the crown. This so-called William doctrine is being framed as part of a tougher update for a monarchy trying to survive under constant scrutiny, online dissection, and rising Republican pressure. Analysts in places like Washington and Canberra are said to view this as William future-proofing the institution by cutting away a weak flank before it turns into a bigger mess. In a digital age where every photo, post, tag, and business tie gets picked apart, the palace cannot afford blurred roles and half-official figures hanging around the edges. That message seems to be landing, especially with younger people who care more about transparency, fairness, and earned status than old social privilege. The idea is brutally simple. Being the Queen's child does not automatically earn you a place at the table of the British state. That line has a cold edge to it, but it also fits the harder image William is building around himself as a future king who values duty over comfort and structure over sentiment. Behind palace walls, though, the emotional cost of this has reportedly hit Queen Camilla hard. Her alleged outbursts about William being a royal dictator have spilled into London social circles and painted a picture of a queen consort who feels her personal legacy is being ripped apart while she is still sitting beside the throne. But for all that frustration, her complaints do not appear to have gained much ground with the working royals, and that has made her position look even weaker. The most painful blow may be Princess Anne's quiet support for William. Anne has long stood for the idea that monarchy is a job, not some soft family club, and that gives William the moral cover Camilla struggles to break. With Anne backing him, this no longer looks like a petty personal feud. It gets framed instead as a matter of institutional survival, palace order, and long-term state protection. That is where the scandal prevention measures move into something bigger, a wider code of conduct for extended family members who might otherwise lean on palace connections. In this version of events, the Parker Bowles family are not only being pushed back physically, but also separated from the Windsor brand socially and publicly. Their names, presence, and connections are being boxed in, so there is no confusion about where they stand, and that marks the fading light of the Camilla era, at the exact moment her own royal victory once looked strongest. William's reported goal is clear and sharp. Camilla's rise to queen must not become a permanent doorway for her family to grow roots inside the monarchy. He is said to be cutting off the chance of the Parker Bowles name turning into some unofficial second branch of the House of Windsor. In that sense, this is less about one bad week at the palace and more about pruning the tree back to its core before the next reign begins. As of March 25th, 2026, the balance of power inside the palace is being described as changed for good. Charles may still be the reigning monarch, but internally, the centre of gravity is said to have shifted toward his heir. With Catherine's huge popularity and Anne's iron discipline behind him, William now looks like the real architect of the monarchy's future, and Forest Lodge is being talked about like the command centre of what comes next. For the Parker Bowles family, the message is brutal. Windsor's doors have not just been shut, they have been locked, and the rules have been rewritten. The picture being painted is of the biggest internal restructuring in generations, with William proving that he is not his father at all. He is shown here as someone who puts the institution over the individual, the crown over the clan, and the future over the past. In that framing, the blended monarchy is done, and a leaner, stricter House of Windsor is rising in its place. From there, the story moves into an even deeper phase, the full consolidation of what some are calling the Wales Regency. This is no longer just about guest lists or car assignments. It has become a larger redefinition of what royal even means in the modern age, with William, strongly backed by Anne, presented as carrying out a bloodless palace power shift against the looser extended family model Charles had allowed to grow. The most lasting part of that shift is the claim that these new boundaries are being made permanent, not temporary. Reports tied to the Lord Chamberlain's office suggest that guest zone protocols are being folded into standing palace practice, meaning the exclusion of Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes would no longer depend on mood, argument, or changing family tensions. It would become part of the basic internal order of Windsor life. That is why Camilla's position in this story feels so stark. She is still Queen Consort, but her power to elevate her own family is said to be fading into smoke. The rooms may still be grand, the title may still be glittering, but the leverage is gone. Her grandchildren, once seen by some as orbiting a semi-royal future, are now being cast as ordinary private citizens with no special path inward at all. For the core Windsors, Catherine, Anne, Edward and Sophie, this is presented almost like a psychological victory after years of sacrifice. They gave up privacy, freedom, and comfort for royal duty, and they reportedly saw the palace softening of the 2020s as an insult to the whole idea of service. Anne especially is said to view William's March 25th move as the final settlement because she has always believed monarchy survives only by remaining clearly separate, restrained, and set apart from normal family life. That is also why forcing the Parker Bowles family into ordinary guest optics matters so much in this script. William is shown as restoring that royal otherness Anne has defended for decades. The message is simple. The crown cannot be inherited through marriage, and its prestige cannot be casually shared just because someone lives near it or dines close to it. That wall, once softened, is now being rebuilt with steel. The media strategy around this has reportedly become just as ruthless as the physical distancing. Palace Communications, now said to be reporting more directly to William on long-term branding, are described as steadily unlinking the Queen's family from official digital records, website framing, and palace social media storytelling. Their appearances are being reduced to small private notes instead of public royal imagery. It is a digital cleanup to match the physical one, and William is presented as fully aware that history gets written in real time online. In this telling, the goal is obvious. Make sure that decades from now, the Parker Bowles name reads like a side note, not a royal branch. Charles, meanwhile, is described as the saddest figure in all this. He loves his wife, and he cares for her grandchildren, but he is also said to understand that William's harder line may be the only thing standing between the monarchy and more public drift. confusion and Republican momentum. Charles always leaned toward blending worlds, but William moves with single focus force, and that difference now defines the whole palace mood. That same hard line sends a warning far beyond Camilla's side of the family. The signal to Prince Harry and Meghan, even without naming them directly, is impossible to miss. If even the Queen's own children can be pushed out of the royal circle and stripped of palace privilege, then no one who openly breaks with the institution should expect soft treatment later. William is building a fortress, and he is deciding who stands inside the walls. By the end of this whole account, the image left behind is one of a clean and permanent break. The monarchy is shedding the last traces of a blended family model and returning to something leaner, tougher, and more tightly controlled. William is not just limiting access or shifting optics, he is being cast as reconsecrating the crown itself, closing a door on the Camilla chapter with quiet force instead of loud drama. And now, as the world moves from reacting to assessing, this moment is being described as a constitutional landmark rather than a palace scuffle. Historians are already comparing it to other turning points when the monarchy had to choose between personal feeling and cold survival. With Anne's tactical support and broad agreement from the working royals, William is presented as choosing survival with a severity that has shaken the old Buckingham Guard. The March 25th edicts, in that light, do not just change protocol, they lock in a new definition of who truly belongs, ending the old assumption that a sovereign spouse can comfortably fold their private family into the royal machine as a matter of personal comfort, even though King Charles III, a man of deep romantic loyalty, had once hoped to build a blended monarchy that reflected modern society. What William's counterattack has exposed is the hard truth at the centre of this palace drama. A monarchy is not a modern family setup, it is an institution built on hierarchy, distance and control. By stripping Tom Parker Bowles, Laura Lopes and their children of any semi-royal image, William is being framed as restoring the old rule of exclusion with brutal force. The message is clear. In matters of state, closeness to the throne means nothing unless it serves the crown itself. In this version of events, every effort by Camilla to ease her biological family into royal life has now been pulled apart, piece by piece. The result is harsh and impossible to miss. Her family is no longer treated like a soft extension of the monarchy, but like a private side note pushed to the edge of royal history. That is why this moment is being described as more than palace tension. It is being cast as a full reset of royal boundaries. Inside the Parker Bowles circle, the reaction is said to be stunned and deeply hurt. Friends of Tom Parker Bowles reportedly suggest the family feels betrayed after years of standing beside the King and Queen through the difficult transition following Queen Elizabeth II's death. They believed that loyalty mattered, but now they feel they helped steady Camilla's image only to be pushed aside the moment William's power became too strong to resist. William's side, though, is described as totally cold on that point. The message coming through unofficial channels is simple. Support for the king is private, and it does not buy anyone a place in the royal box. That hard tone has become a defining feature of the so-called William Doctrine. It does not centre emotion, and it does not bend for wounded feelings when the institution itself is at stake. Princess Anne's role in this phase is said to be just as sharp, but more technical. She reportedly worked in the lead-up to March 25th to make sure the legal foundation behind these measures could not be quietly undone later. Alongside the Duchy of Cornwall and the Crown Estate, Anne is said to have helped shut down any hidden perks, soft funding, or quiet privileges that might still flow toward the Parker Bowles family through back channels. That is why the so-called Walk of the Commoner is described as only the visible surface of a much deeper shift. Underneath it all, William and Anne are said to have cut off the shadow system that once allowed Camilla to extend royal hospitality to her children with little notice. What followed was a complete social and financial decoupling. The message to Camilla is brutal. She may be queen consort, but she does not run the Windsor brand, and she does not control its future. Publicly, that harder line appears to have helped William rather than hurt him. Reports tied to the evening of March 25th describe a noticeable rise in support for the Prince of Wales as many people responded to the order and clarity he projected during a time of political strain and economic stress. For a lot of the public, a monarchy that looks like a club for the well-connected is a problem, but a monarchy that looks disciplined, duty-bound, and tightly managed still feels defendable. That is why William's move is being framed not just as cold, but as strategic. By removing the confusion around the Parker-Bowles family, he is portrayed as making the monarchy easier to justify and easier to protect. In blunt terms, he has sacrificed peace inside his father's household to strengthen the political future of his own reign. That is a ruthless move, but in this account, it is exactly what makes him look strong. The Camilla era, as this version tells it, is now visibly fading. She may still carry out public duties beside the king with her usual composure, but any hope of giving her family a lasting place close to the crown appears crushed. The Parker-Bowles family, once seen by some as drifting towards semi-royal status, are now being pushed fully outside the gates of royal relevance. The gate has not only been shut, it has been bolted. That is why William's victory is described as total. He is cast here as the true heir to Queen Elizabeth II's hard discipline, a future king who understands that the crown must remain set apart. In that image, he becomes the man willing to draw a hard line, bruise personal feelings, and still move forward because the survival of the institution matters more than family comfort. So in this telling, March 25th, 2026 becomes the day the blended monarchy died and a stricter state monarchy was reborn. William did not just remove a few step relatives from privileged optics. He restored the hierarchy, cleared the confusion, and closed down what this narrative calls the Parker-Bowles experiment for good. The Windsor name stays protected, the structure is restored, and the old, blurred family model is over. As the media moved from shock into deeper analysis, one conclusion began to dominate establishment thinking. This was not just another family clash, but a serious palace power shift. This final chapter focuses on what happened after William's hard-edged mandate and how it changed the balance between the reigning monarch and the heir waiting in the wings. The attempt to pull a non-royal family into the centre of royal state life had, in this account, now been formally declared a failure by the man expected to wear the imperial state crown next. One of the clearest signs of that shift is the silence of King Charles III. According to palace observations, the king has entered a period of reflection, allowing William to act as the moral centre of the monarchy, while Charles remains the legal head of state. That matters because it suggests the living authority inside the palace has already started moving toward the Prince of Wales. William's argument is that closeness to the king is no longer enough. To matter inside the institution, a person must be essential to the work of the crown itself. By removing the Parker-Bowles children and grandchildren from royal logistics, ending access to state cars, and limiting them to guest-only zones, William is said to have stripped away the soft power Camilla spent years building around her biological family. The relationship between William and Camilla is also described as permanently changed. Their cold peace has hardened into professional distance, with Camilla still carrying out her public role, but no longer able to shape the family brand in private. William's alliance with Princess Anne has created a tight inner circle that she cannot get around. And that circle now defines Windsor as a guarded institution built on duty, not personal connection through marriage. For the Parker-Bowles family, the Walk of the Commoner becomes more than a one-day humiliation. It becomes their new social reality. They are now palace guests in the strictest sense, allowed near it at times, perhaps, but permanently outside its future. That is a brutal downgrade in symbolism, and symbolism in royal life hits like law. The wider message sent to Britain, the Commonwealth, and the international audience is just as strong. At a time when monarchy is constantly questioned, William is being portrayed as offering a leaner, cleaner, and more disciplined institution. By cutting away extended relatives who do not serve the public, he makes the monarchy easier to defend to taxpayers and less exposed to future reputational damage. That is why the legacy of this day is being framed as the moment William stopped looking like only an heir and started looking like an architect. He did not slightly adjust his father's blended approach. He tore it down and replaced it with a Fortress Windsor model, tighter, colder, more controlled, and far less willing to blur the line between private family and public crown. So as the world looks ahead to the eventual reign of King William V, the picture forming is of a monarch who sees the crown as a lonely burden, not a shared family spotlight. The Camilla chapter may continue on paper, but in spirit, this telling says it is already over. The future of Windsor now sits firmly with William and Catherine, strengthened by Anne's old-school iron and protected by a system that no longer leaves room for borrowed status or blurred loyalties. The Parker Bowles family, in the end, returned to the background of British high society, connected, comfortable, and known, perhaps, but no longer wrapped in royal sunlight. The gates of Windsor have closed, and the House of Windsor now stands in this narrative as tighter, harder, and more unified for the challenges of the 21st century. Comment below with your take on this royal shake-up, and subscribe for more dramatic royal updates and deep dive coverage. The United Kingdom shall no longer provide armed police protection to the Duke of Sussex. The decision is final, and no further reassessment will be entertained. Buckingham Palace made this explosive announcement on Christmas morning, the 25th of December 2025, at 9 a.m. GMT. With this thunderous declaration, the monarchy obliterated any lingering illusions of reconciliation overnight. For years, the royal family had carefully tiptoed around the storm surrounding Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, issuing measured statements while court appeals dragged on, silently enduring global headlines that blurred the line between constitutional reality and self-fashioned celebrity myth. But on the 25th of December 2025, King Charles II broke the silence, not with subtlety, not with metaphor, but with unmistakable authority. The decision came as an unambiguous endorsement of a legal ruling that severs Harry's final tether to institutional power, the right to taxpayer-funded armed royal security. In the UK, this move is more than legal. It is symbolic, constitutional, and absolute. Insiders confirmed the timing was deliberate, released from Clarence House just hours before the King joined Prince William, Princess Catherine, and Princess Anne at St. George's Chapel for the Christmas Day service, in what observers described as a coordinated, intentional, and historically unprecedented display. The King then appeared beside his heir, placing his hand on William's shoulder before the world's cameras as if passing an invisible scepter. The moment shocked even seasoned royal watchers inside the private chapel reception. King Charles reportedly unveiled the legendary Oriental Circuit crown, not for Camilla, but for Catherine, Princess of Wales, a crown once worn by Queen Victoria and long held in ceremonial reserve, was officially entrusted to Catherine in what the palace described as a gesture of future female sovereignty. A royal statement followed. Her Royal Highness, the Princess of Wales, shall henceforth hold ceremonial stewardship of the Oriental crown in trust for the future of the House of Windsor. Buckingham Palace, 25th of December 2025, 1:14 p.m. This was not merely a moment of glamour, it was a deliberate, unmistakable message. The future is no longer contested. There is one royal court, and it belongs to William and Catherine. All others, especially the one Harry was rumoured to be building in parallel, are now shadows. This hardline pivot comes after months of whispers that Harry had lobbied the newly elected Labour government for a reassessment of his personal threat level, hoping to regain entitlement to elite protection through the Royal and VIP Executive Committee for a brief window in mid-December. Headlines in UK and US outlets suggested progress. Leaked reports cited informal conversations between Harry's legal team and Home Office representatives, focusing on Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood, who remained open to procedural review. But on the 23rd of December, 2 days before the King's statement, Rake issued its final ruling, a resounding rejection of reassessment. Hours later, the palace confirmed it would not only support the ruling, but codify it into royal policy permanently. This isn't about risk assessment, It's about royal status. Prince Harry is no longer entitled to crown privileges. Senior royal correspondents and the Times insiders now confirm what many had suspected. King Charles personally lobbied against Harry's reassessment. Behind closed doors, far from neutral, the monarch intervened decisively through constitutional channels to make the ruling irreversible. One palace aide, speaking anonymously to the Telegraph, said bluntly, "Charles waited. He gave Harry every chance to walk away gracefully. That grace expired. This is no delay tactic. This is the final door slamming shut." Indeed, Palace Communications this week described Harry and Meghan's continued use of royal connections for charity events, promotional tours, and their Orwell Foundation branding as a form of institutional ambiguity that needed clarification for both the British public and global audiences. The same statement confirmed that Harry and Meghan's Orwell Foundation will no longer be allowed to use royal images, titles, or seals of legitimacy, or present projects as supported by British royal patronages. They are barred from promoting global initiatives using their former Sussex titles in association with UK-based diplomacy or Commonwealth charity networks. This ruling is a seismic blow to the couple's media and philanthropy ecosystem, which relied heavily on the blurred duality between royal departure and retained public fascination in the US entertainment market. This move may weaken the Ark Oil brand significantly, especially among donors, investors, and corporate collaborators who once valued implied royal access. While Harry's royal brand collapses, Princess Catherine's standing has never been stronger. A new royal website launched quietly on the 20th of December, The Crown's Compass. It presents her as a steward of legacy and a bridge to future sovereignty. Her work carries both moral and ceremonial continuity of the Crown. The site, built under the authority of the Lord Chamberlain's office, features pages dedicated to her charity work, early childhood initiatives, and most notably her new ceremonial guardianship of the Oriental Circuit. The subtext is unmistakable. Catherine is not merely a consort in waiting. She is now a symbol of royal continuity in her own right. In the coming weeks, the palace is expected to release a revised patronage map redistributing former Sussex charities to William, Catherine, Anne, and Edward, publish legal notices codifying royal title restrictions globally, and initiate a full audit of unauthorised charitable claims made in the name of the royal family between 2020 and 2025. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's reactions, along with the suspected involvement of Prince Andrew in facilitating Meghan's early entry into royal life, will be explored in Part 2. Stay tuned as we dive deeper into the most dramatic power consolidation in modern Windsor history. In the aftermath of King Charles's landmark decision to end Prince Harry's state-funded security and dissolve all Sussex royal privileges, another story is now surfacing, one stretching back to 2016, that may explain how the monarchy lost control of its own house. Prince Andrew, long overshadowed by scandal, is now at the centre of growing suspicions that he played a covert role in facilitating Meghan Markle's rise within the royal family, not out of loyalty, but from resentment, rivalry, and revenge. Investigative journalists close to the royal household's internal review report that Andrew personally recommended a private legal advisor, Lucy Hargrove, to assist in early background checks for Meghan during her courtship with Harry. Hargrove, known to have worked for Andrew during his frequent Middle East charity engagements, was quietly pushed into palace circles when Meghan began appearing publicly with Harry in late 2016. It wasn't flagged as unusual at the time, one palace aide said, but in hindsight, it was the first crack in a firewall that should never have failed. What raises eyebrows today is that Meghan was reportedly granted a far smoother integration process into royal operations than other outsiders, including receiving early briefings on protocol and travel logistics, which were often delayed or denied, even to aristocratic newcomers. For years, Prince Andrew was known inside palace walls to harbour deep private doubts about his brother Charles's capacity to lead. He once reportedly told a family member that Charles is a thinker, not a ruler. Mother loved him, but she never trusted him with the empire, a confidential remark dating back to 2015. At the time, it sounded like bitter sibling rivalry. Today, those words land with chilling relevance. Andrew long saw himself as the forgotten son, a decorated war veteran, once a public favourite, and in his own mind, a more suitable monarch than his introspective, emotionally distant elder brother. Royal sources say that belief hardened into resentment after Queen Elizabeth II stripped him of royal patronages in 2022 following scandal. What followed was not withdrawal, but quiet calculation. It was in Meghan Markle, an outsider, a divorced actress, and a fast-rising media figure, that Andrew allegedly saw opportunity. Not romance, but disruption. Someone who could pull Harry away, blur the hierarchy, and destabilise Charles's court from the inside. At least 2 senior members of the royal household, Sir Clive Alderton and Lady Susan Hussey, raised early alarms about Meghan's entry process being abnormally fast-tracked. Internal briefing notes from as early as March 2017 flagged concerns over Meghan's aggressive media footprint, prior political activism, and lack of alignment with royal neutrality. Those warnings were overridden. One memo reportedly stated, "HRH Andrew has personally vouched, proceed without obstruction." That line, now infamous, came from a redacted palace document dated March 14, 2017. At the time, Charles was preoccupied with his transition toward kingship and delegated day-to-day integration decisions to court staff. That delegation is now viewed internally as a catastrophic lapse in judgment. Princess Anne, known for her discipline-first mindset, initially stayed neutral during the 2018 to 2020 Sussex turmoil. She watched. She waited. By early 2021, Anne had turned decisively against both Andrew and Meghan. In a rare confrontation at Balmoral, she reportedly told Andrew directly, "You brought her in. You'll live with what it's done to this family." After Queen Elizabeth II's death in 2022, Anne became the loudest internal voice urging Charles to draw a hard line and stop allowing royal status to be used as currency for branding and media games. Queen Camilla remained publicly distant but privately alert. Aides describe her stance toward Meghan as cordial yet clipped. Sources say Camilla was among the first to warn Charles in mid-2023 that Harry was planning a UK return via security litigation. She reportedly said, "He's not coming back to protect his family. He's coming back to reclaim a throne that never belonged to him." While Charles's Christmas declaration reset the rules, insiders say it was Prince William who pushed hardest behind palace walls. William was reportedly furious when he learned Meghan had reactivated UK media contacts to float reconciliation narratives. While Harry framed his return around family safety, William's response was blunt. "You don't undermine the crown from Montecito all year, then fly back expecting a motorcade." Sources confirm William personally oversaw the reassignment of former Sussex-linked charities. The Invictus Games Foundation was absorbed under the Royal Commonwealth Veterans Trust. SmartWorks UK transitioned to Princess Sophie. The Hub Community Kitchen folded into the Windsor Food Security Network under Catherine's leadership. By freezing Harry out of security, titles and charitable infrastructure, and by reviving historic regalia to empower Catherine, Charles wasn't settling a feud. He was drawing a line. A senior Commonwealth ambassador summed it up plainly. "This isn't about who wears which tiara, it's about who speaks for Britain." The next phase of fallout didn't stay in Britain. By December 2025, the rupture between the House of Windsor and the Sussexes had turned deeply moral. As Charles severed Harry from security, titles, and legitimacy, another unresolved issue exploded into public view: the increasingly controversial relationship between Meghan Markle and her estranged father, Thomas Markle. What began as sympathy-driven headlines in American tabloids quickly collapsed into one of the most damaging credibility crises Meghan had faced since leaving the UK. On December 24, 2025, hours before Catherine hosted the Together at Christmas carol service, US outlets claimed Meghan had reached out to her ailing father after reports of his leg amputation surgery in the Philippines. The timing raised instant red flags. Within 24 hours, the story unravelled. Family members confirmed no call, no letter, no verified contact had occurred. Investigative journalists later established the alleged outreach email was sent to an address inactive for over 5 years, while Thomas was hospitalised and unable to access communications. British commentators quickly reclassified the episode as a manufactured reconciliation narrative, not healing, but image management. Palace sources confirmed the incident triggered an internal briefing on Christmas Day, where the phrase ethical incompatibility was repeatedly used. Unlike past controversies dismissed as media friction, this one cut to character. A former royal communications advisor said it plainly. You cannot claim victimhood while exploiting a disabled parent for narrative control. That crosses a line. The contrast with Catherine was unavoidable. Raised in a close-knit family, her parents stayed out of the spotlight entirely. No interviews, no memoirs, no monetization. When her brother faced struggles years earlier, the palace response was silence, protection, and discretion. By late December 2025, editors at The Times and Le Figaro framed the issue not as popularity, but moral fitness. One editorial concluded, "This is no longer about image, it is about proximity to power." Internal assessments circulated after Christmas formally categorized Meghan as structurally incompatible with royal service, a designation rarely used and never before applied to a former duchess. Reasons cited included repeated use of private family relationships for leverage, strategic timing against royal events, commercial framing of reconciliation, and inability to operate within ethical constraints. This designation justified the final severing of all symbolic ties between the Sussex brand and the monarchy. Notably absent during the controversy was Prince Harry's voice. Sources say he was advised not to comment, especially after his security appeal failed. In Britain, that silence was widely read as weakness. A senior aide to Prince William reportedly said, "A husband who won't protect the truth inside his own family cannot be trusted with the crown's shadow." The impact spread across the United States. Philanthropic partners quietly paused relationships. Hollywood agencies advised distance from royal-adjacent moral controversies. What was once Meghan's greatest strength, control of narrative, had become her biggest liability. By the evening of December 26, 2025, palace insiders confirmed no reconciliation paths remained open. The moral judgment was settled, Catherine stood as custodian of continuity, and Meghan came to symbolise disruption without restraint, as a monarchy fighting for legitimacy in the modern age drew its final boundary. That distinction mattered more than bloodlines or love stories ever could. On the morning of December 26, 2025, Clarence House released a follow-up communication that left no space for interpretation or negotiation. Using clipped constitutional language, the King's Office confirmed that the Crown had concluded its full review of all royal associations following the Sussex departure, bringing the matter to a definitive close. As of January 1, 2026, no entity founded, operated or represented by the Duke and Duchess of Sussex shall retain any royal endorsement, inference or affiliation. The decision is final. With that single paragraph, the monarchy formally severed all remaining symbolic, charitable and public ties with Archewell, the non-profit and media venture Harry and Meghan built as a hybrid of philanthropy and brand architecture. This was not simply a rejection of two individuals, it was the structural unveiling of a new monarchy, a Windsor reset that consolidates power exclusively around the heirs, clears the haze of celebrity distraction, and redefines the role of royalty in a fragmented global media age. The implications for Archewell are immediate and far-reaching. Founded in 2020, the foundation had long benefited from a carefully maintained halo effect, subtle references to Diana, language echoing the values of the monarchy, and imagery designed to imply continuity without stating it outright. That ambiguity is now legally and symbolically over. Effective immediately, Archewell must cease using the Sussex coat of arms across all platforms. The organisation is prohibited from using descriptors such as royally inspired, Duchess-backed, or Windsor-endorsed. UK-based charitable partners previously associated with the foundation, including Grenfell-related initiatives and early childhood programs, are to be transitioned under the new Windsor Unity framework led by Catherine. This final action delivers a crippling symbolic blow to Harry and Meghan's platform in the United States. Without royal cues, their positioning shifts from global envoys to celebrity activists, a critical distinction in elite charity, political and corporate circles. One former Netflix executive put it bluntly: no title, no crown tie, no palace proximity that changes the game overnight. While Archewell's privileges collapsed in public view, a separate and deeply private ceremony unfolded behind Windsor's gates. In a rarely used chamber beneath St. George's Hall, King Charles convened a closed-door session with William, Catherine and Princess Anne. According to insiders, it was there that the Oriental circlet, designed for Queen Victoria in 1853, was formally entrusted to Catherine, not as an heirloom, but as a symbol of transfer and authority. Catherine was named Ceremonial Crown Steward of the East, a title revived for the first time in 112 years. What makes this moment historic is that the circlet was designed exclusively for reigning queens or consorts. It was never intended for a Princess of Wales. Historian Dr. Eliza March explained, "He is not waiting for Catherine to become queen. He is making her the monarchy's face now." The message to Britain and the world was unmistakable. Catherine will represent the crown in global affairs where Camilla cannot. At the same time, the royal household began implementing what insiders call the Sovereign Operating Code, a restructuring that consolidates royal duties under 3 defined pillars. Prince William now holds command over constitutional engagements, state visits, and military representation. Catherine leads cultural diplomacy, early childhood policy, education initiatives, and international charity relations, particularly across the Commonwealth. Princess Anne and Prince Edward oversee legacy institutions, royal archives, veteran affairs, and internal audits of charitable operations. This framework is a direct response to the chaos of the freelance royal era pioneered by Harry and Meghan. The King's decree makes one rule clear: no member of the royal family may act autonomously while retaining royal branding. There will be no parallel courts, no mixed messaging, and no soft power leakage. With Andrew neutralised, Meghan discredited, and Harry locked out of state protection, royal historians quietly compare Charles's moves to Elizabeth I's consolidation of the Tudor court. Commentator Penelope Radnor summarised it best. Charles has ended a decade of ambiguity. He's drawing bright lines. It's not only strategic, it's personal. In the next phase, attention turned sharply to the emotional and reputational fallout for Harry and Meghan, particularly Meghan's failed father reconciliation narrative and the public backlash it triggered in both Britain and the United States. On December 22nd, 2025, just hours before the Princess of Wales hosted the beloved Together at Christmas carol service at Westminster Abbey, a startling headline swept transatlantic media. Meghan Markle reaches out to estranged father after 7 years of silence. The story appeared engineered for sympathy and redemption, but within 48 hours, the narrative collapsed. Investigations revealed a PR fabrication riddled with inconsistencies, technical errors, and evasive confirmations. Analysts believe the timing was deliberate. The claims surfaced the same day Catherine and her children appeared on national television during one of the monarchy's most watched goodwill events. Royal reporters, including Dan Wootton and Camilla Tominey, described the episode as a classic misdirection strategy designed to fracture headlines. "It was a slow hijack," said one palace source, "a reminder that Meghan still sees the royal calendar as competition." The story unravelled rapidly. Thomas Markle Jr. and other family members confirmed no contact occurred. The alleged outreach consisted of an email sent to an inactive address unused for over 5 years. That account had been deactivated during Thomas Sr.'s earlier hospitalisation and was no longer accessible. Compounding the issue, Meghan's representatives refused to specify the date or method of contact, issuing only vague statements citing privacy concerns. The British press responded aggressively. In a rare rebuttal, the Daily Mail confirmed through journalist Caroline Graham, who maintained direct contact with Thomas Markle, that his phone number had not changed and no outreach occurred. Samantha Markle delivered a blistering public response. "This is PR garbage. If she cared, she'd fly him to a hospital and pay his bills. Instead, she emails a dead inbox and calls it redemption." The quote went viral, amplifying backlash across UK and US media outlets. Rather than restoring credibility, the episode reopened old wounds and reignited criticism surrounding authenticity and family accountability. The contrast with Catherine became unavoidable. Two women whose opposing approaches to privacy, loyalty, and restraint now define the royal conversation, and whose diverging paths continue to shape how power, character, and continuity are judged inside the modern monarchy. Catherine is widely seen as dignified, guarded, and deeply family-focused, and she has never publicly dissected her relatives or dragged old disputes into the spotlight. She doesn't cash in on pain, and she doesn't trade privacy for clicks. This year's Christmas Carol event reflected that clearly, centering on veteran families, foster care, children, and young musicians, all delivered without a single headline engineered to boost her personal image or brand. Meghan, by contrast, is increasingly viewed by critics and moderates alike as someone who releases emotional narratives at carefully timed moments, usually when competing headlines threaten to steal attention or shift public sympathy. A UK government poll released on December 24th showed 71% of respondents said Catherine best represents royal integrity, while 68% believed Meghan's outreach to Thomas Markle was opportunistic. Only 13% viewed the gesture as sincere, a gap that's hard to ignore. Sources close to the US media landscape confirm that Netflix executives and Spotify investors have quietly begun reconsidering future partnerships with Meghan, especially as her image becomes harder to manage and less commercially predictable. There's only so many times a story can be rebranded before audiences stop buying the narrative altogether. One senior executive in Los Angeles put it bluntly behind closed doors, and even long-time high-profile allies like Oprah Winfrey and Serena Williams have noticeably stepped back from the latest Markle storyline, choosing not to comment, repost, or publicly defend it. Buckingham Palace issued no direct statement, but insiders say Queen Camilla was furious at the attempt to overshadow Catherine's event, and Princess Anne reportedly called the PR move crass beyond measure. King Charles, as expected, stayed publicly silent, but his actions spoke louder than any statement ever could. With the Windsor reset fully underway, Meghan is no longer a rogue duchess playing optics from the sidelines. She is now an outsider, formally, morally, and publicly acknowledged as such. The final chapter of this series turns to what followed next, as the royal line of succession was sealed, and as Charles, William, and Catherine moved to govern a leaner, sharper, more disciplined monarchy. Precisely at 6 p.m. on December 26th, 2025, a gold-embossed communique was posted on the gates of Buckingham Palace. Short, formal, and unmistakably final, it read, "Let it be known by order of the Sovereign, and in accordance with the Privy Seal, the House of Windsor reaffirms its succession and its service. The crown shall pass solely through the heirs of His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales. No claims, titles, or associations beyond this line shall be retained or revived with this declaration." With that single document, King Charles III did what no modern monarch had dared to do. He sealed the line of succession, not just through blood, but through conduct, loyalty, and constitutional alignment. This wasn't just about lineage, it was about identity. Alongside the symbolic decree, palace legal teams finalised sweeping administrative changes effective January 1st, 2026. All public-facing references to the Duke and Duchess of Sussex were removed from official royal and UK government platforms. No future seating plans, ceremonial roles, or state protocols will include Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, or their children at official royal events, except under strictly private family circumstances. The sovereign grant audit was updated to reflect zero obligations or entitlements owed to the Sussex household. A formal letter was also sent to international embassies and Commonwealth leaders confirming that Harry and Meghan hold no representative status for the UK or the Crown. For the first time since 2020, the separation was no longer symbolic, it was constitutional. There is no path back. Over the past 3 years, as the Sussex brand drifted deeper into Hollywood's polished chaos, Prince William and Princess Catherine quietly built something sturdier, a monarchy rooted in service, clarity, and generational trust. The newly circulated royal calendar tells the story plainly. William will lead all foreign state visits in 2026, including Canada, Kenya, and Japan. Catherine will head the newly formed Crown Trust for Early Life, partnering directly with 11 Commonwealth nations. Princess Anne and Prince Edward will rotate leadership of ceremonial institutions while safeguarding ethical conduct and financial transparency. As one senior palace advisor said, "We are no longer in the age of celebrity proximity. We are in the age of institutional renewal." Despite the scale of these decisions, there was no dramatic response from Harry and Meghan, no press conference, no legal counterstrike. Instead, a quiet post appeared on the Archewell website at midnight. "We remain committed to compassion, impact, and forward progress as a family and as global citizens. Thank you for your continued support." The tone was muted, corporate, and worlds away from the fire seen in the Oprah interview, the Netflix series, or past grievances. The fight was over, and the relevance was fading fast. Sources in Montecito say Meghan has shifted her focus toward a personal lifestyle brand, while Harry is considering a new veterans project that may no longer use the Invictus name. The titles are gone, the semi-royal permissions are gone. What remains is reputation, fragile and disconnected from the crown. Earlier today at Sandringham, King Charles privately presented Prince William with the restored Great Windsor Key. The golden artifact, traditionally held in the monarch's private study, symbolises responsibility, not dominance. Charles's words, recorded only in the royal logbook, were later shared with select press. "I am not immortal, nor shall I reign forever. My duty was to restore the line, to prepare the soil. The tree will grow through you. Let it be strong." The year 2025 will be remembered as a reckoning, not just for titles, but for choosing service over sentiment and continuity over chaos. The monarchy has been reset, the lines redrawn, and the future clarified. There are no blurred roles left, no ghost courts in Montecito, only the crown, only the Windsor line rising steadily with William and Catherine, unified, grounded, and unshaken. If you followed this series to the end, make sure to like, subscribe, share, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters, and we'll be tracking every development as the new royal era unfolds through 2026. In the early hours of February 3rd, 2026, London awoke to an unprecedented revelation. Buckingham Palace had quietly but decisively confirmed what the inner circles of royalty had long suspected. Prince William, the Prince of Wales, has officially been named the sole beneficiary of one of the monarchy's most secretive, strategically significant, and historically potent private estates, the enigmatic Cedar Estate. This announcement, delivered in a meticulously worded midnight dispatch, sent ripples across royal watchers, historians, and political observers alike. The official statement, released at 11:58 p.m. GMT on the palace's authorised channels, outlined that, under the terms of a sealed covenant trust, executed by Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II in 2020 and formally witnessed by her legal counsel, the property known as the Cedar Estate shall pass in full and exclusive guardianship to His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, effective immediately. Royal insiders were stunned, not simply by the inheritance itself, but by the enormous symbolic weight of what it represents for the future of the monarchy and its private legacy. Tucked away deep within the Chiltern Hills, straddling the border between Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire, the Cedar Estate has long been whispered about by senior courtiers as a strategic royal refuge. Unlike the widely recognised ceremonial estates of Sandringham, Balmoral or Windsor, this estate remained a shadow of secrecy, never officially listed in royal documents, the royal registry, or public media reports. Until now, its existence was nothing more than a quiet palace rumour. The revelation today exposes a legacy that could very well reshape the perception of royal stewardship for generations to come. Originally purchased in 1944 by King George VI, the Cedar Estate was conceived as a wartime retreat, designed with emergency bunkers, underground passageways, and a perimeter fortified by centuries-old cedar groves. The central mansion, a masterpiece of Jacobean revivalist architecture, is surrounded by 3 working farms, a glacial-fed lake, and a 12th-century stone chapel that has never been opened to the public. It's a place where history and secrecy entwine. Internal briefing notes, shared this morning with members of the Royal Correspondent Guild, provide breathtaking insight into the estate's contents. Among the treasures, a private chapel with an engraved memorial vault listing royal family members who served in armed conflicts. Archival vaults housing 186 oak chests filled with personal war correspondence and confidential royal communiques. 72 previously undisclosed royal portraits, including never-before-seen oil paintings of King George VI and Princess Margaret, and 14 sealed audio recordings of Queen Elizabeth II in private dialogue with Winston Churchill, Nelson Mandela, Ronald Reagan, and Charles de Gaulle. One archivist described the collection as not a museum of history, but the raw, unfiltered architecture of royal memory, offering a window into the private soul of the monarchy. Sources close to the late Queen insist that the decision to pass the estate to William was not impulsive, but rather the result of years of careful consideration. Between 2017 and 2021, Prince William reportedly spent numerous private weekends at the Cedar Estate, walking the cedar groves with the Queen, reviewing wartime correspondence, and assisting in restoration projects within the South Vault. In a handwritten annotation found in the Covenant Trust, Queen Elizabeth II reportedly wrote, "He will inherit more than the crown. He will inherit the silence that preserved it." This is not ceremonial duty. It's legacy stewardship. William was the only senior royal consulted by the Queen during her late-life reforms, which included overhauling royal education, increasing transparency, and modernising institutional record-keeping. Aides described his visits as quiet but profoundly engaged. He personally catalogued naval dispatches, refiled hundreds of letters from World War II soldiers, and even repaired moisture control systems in the archival chambers. Unlike typical ceremonial visits to royal estates, this was hands-on governance of history itself. The Cedar Estate is unlike any other royal property. It does not fall under the Crown Estate nor the Duchy of Cornwall. Instead, it exists under a private legal mechanism, a covenant trust created in 2020, filed under Charter Seal 0142 and witnessed by her personal solicitor, a constitutional advisor, and a notary from the Royal Archives. The trust was sealed and equipped with a delayed activation clause, designed to activate only after the Queen's state funeral concluded and Prince William was publicly recognised as heir to institutional responsibility. That moment has now arrived. However, this decision stirred quiet tension behind the palace walls. Multiple sources confirm that Queen Camilla and her son Tom Parker Bowles had been observing the estate for years, quietly but persistently angling to bring it under their influence. Beginning in late 2024, Camilla advocated for turning the estate into a sanctuary of modern royal service, proposing a Windsor Cultural Legacy Centre, gourmet retreats celebrating British culinary heritage, literary salons emphasising female royal narratives, and small group historical tours through the cedar groves. Meanwhile, Tom Parker Bowles saw enormous commercial potential in the property. Private memos, reviewed by royal insiders, show he considered opening a Michelin-grade tasting restaurant inside the old hunting lodge, launching an artisanal food brand, Royal Wild, featuring cedar-aged cheeses, wild trout, honey from estate hives, and seasonal Highland wine and cider fairs for elite guests. A leaked briefing note dated October 18, 2025, revealed that his legal team even evaluated whether portions of the estate could be reclassified under public heritage law, arguing that its wartime origins justified cultural protection. In November 2025, Camilla hosted a private reception at a countryside manor near Henley-on-Thames, inviting heritage donors, food critics, and art historians. On the surface, it celebrated rural sustainability, but attendees tell a different story. The event was a trial balloon for a public-private stewardship model, allowing the royal household and the Crown Charitable Council, tied to Camilla's foundation, to share control over the estate. William politely but firmly declined, maintaining the Queen's original vision. 3 weeks later, he activated the Covenant Trust. On January 31st, 2026, the Land Registry quietly updated. The estate officially named North Acre Hall, a sprawling 1,200-acre heritage property nestled among Wiltshire's ancient hedgerows and Berkshire's rolling hills, now securely under William's stewardship. Historically, it had been a lesser-known royal retreat, hosting hunting weekends and sensitive diplomatic gatherings during Queen Elizabeth II's reign. Its combination of historical prestige, agricultural revenue, and untapped licensing rights linked to an 800-year legacy rendered it a rare and uniquely strategic royal asset. Documents dated September 8, 2022, reveal that just weeks before the Queen's passing, she formally reclassified North Acre Hall from a shared Crown estate asset to a personal sovereign holding, ensuring she could transfer it privately through her will rather than via institutional succession. In Appendix R3, she wrote, "Let North Acre remain with the child who bears the burden of our future. Let it be not merely shelter, but sanctuary." The decision bypassed both Prince Charles, now King, and Princess Anne, sending quiet but significant ripples through the inner royal circle. According to palace archivists, this was the first personal transfer of its kind since Queen Victoria's 1872 Highland reallocation executed in absolute secrecy. Only 2 living witnesses, Lady Sarah Chatto and the late Queen's legal advisor, Sir Alice Denholm, were privy to the codicil and its encrypted delivery method. The envelope was deposited in a sealed box marked, "For the reign after me," to be opened only after ceremonial consensus between the new sovereign and the Privy Seal office. Not everyone inside the palace was pleased with the revelation. Leaked notes from an aide to Princess Anne indicate that Camilla and Tom Parker Bowles had been lobbying discreetly since 2023 to incorporate North Acre Hall into a royal culinary heritage venture, presented as a farm-to-table revival but backed by luxury investors from the UAE and a Paris-based venture capital firm. The plan included a 5-star boutique hotel, heritage cooking school, and rebranding of the estate as a luxury Windsor destination. A commercial feasibility study from July 2025 valued North Acre Hall's licensing rights alone at over £48 million over a 10-year horizon. Camilla's motivations were not sentimental. They were strategic, aimed at legacy branding and securing economic autonomy for her son. But all of it collapsed under the Queen's decisive directive. One courtier summarised the moment. Camilla believed she had soft-bought the estate through influence. The Queen outmanoeuvred her from beyond the grave. What followed was a carefully orchestrated campaign of whispers and subtle pressure, led by Camilla's longtime fixer, Maurice Loul, a retired PR consultant known for palace back-channel games. Anonymous insiders reported a surge in leaked think pieces in late 2025, suggesting the monarchy had overinvested in heritage assets and needed to recalibrate generational equity. In a final push, Tom allegedly attempted to secure a lease inquiry on the North Acre Southern Orchard Tract, claiming it was unused arable land. The request was promptly denied by the Duchy of Cornwall legal team, citing inheritance protection, sparking what one palace source called a Camilla temper crisis in November 2025. By Christmas 2025, William had formally assumed stewardship of North Acre Hall, conducting his first private visit with Princess Catherine and their children. A new high-discretion security rotation was established, and 2 trusted estate managers from William's Sandhurst circle were appointed. To the public, the transition passed almost unnoticed, like a shadow sliding across a polished floor. But inside the palace, it was nothing short of a whispered coronation, a transfer of power bound to land and legacy, invisible in law, but rooted entirely in the final, unassailable will of the late Queen herself. In the words of a senior footman who served both Elizabeth and now William, this wasn't just a house, it was the Queen's final chess move. It wasn't the grandeur of the estate that startled the family. No, it was the covenant written in Queen Elizabeth II's unmistakable hand, each looped cursive stroke deliberate and commanding. Folded 3 times and secured within a leather folio, the document bore the mark W. William George, discovered during Princess Anne's forensic review of the Queen's private correspondence at Windsor's Oak Room in mid-January 2026. This codicil, the second and final amendment to her sealed will, dated exactly 1 year before her passing, revealed a title that had long eluded public awareness. Clarence Hill Estate, nestled deep in the Chiltern Hills, reached only by a discreet private driveway stretching 4 miles from any main road. But Clarence Hill was far more than a royal retreat. It was a fortified legacy, a silent guardian of moral and dynastic continuity. The estate had been quietly purchased in 1947 by King George VI, designed as an off-book reserve for direct heirs, insulated from Parliament, public scrutiny, and the flux of royal funding. While Sandringham and Balmoral were well-known private holdings, Clarence Hill remained a secret covenant property, never rented, never mortgaged, never altered, and carefully preserved. Queen